Bros was just watching the Royal Knights train when the commander of the entire squad walks up to him and tells him to leave. Says he's bothering all knights standing there like a maniac. His maid steps in and says, "Hey, you're talking to a prince." The commander doesn't care. Calls him a useless, ugly, bitchless bastard who's interfering with training. But then the commander got a stare from the boy's eyes that he wasn't expecting. An intense and brutal stare that doesn't belong on a 14-year-old. The air gets heavy. The soldiers start walking over to see what's going on. They see the third prince, the one everyone treats like a useless joke, and they relax. But then Kid reaches up and snaps a twig off a branch above him, and he tells the commander his knights are garbage. Their training is trash. The troops aren't being strengthened. They're just being babysat and wasting time. Duds gets offended, obviously, and was about to curse at the boy, but in the blink of an eye, the kid is behind him. Habel barely gets his sword up in time, and he knows if he hadn't, he'd be dead. He just blocked a killing strike from a stick. The kid smiles, then he lets go of the branch, and the commander's sword goes flying out of his hands, gone, disarmed by a twig, in front of every single soldier under his command. The kid says he's impressed by the commander's lack of skill, couldn't even defend himself against someone useless. Habel drops to his knees and begs for forgiveness. While his men are frozen, their commander is on the ground groveling in front of the prince nobody respects. Now this dude real name is Baron. He used to be a king, the king of a nation called Sacritia. He fought a war against the kingdom of Kyrus, a war over an artifact called the Axis of Time that could literally rewind history, and Kyrus burned everything to the ground. Baron everything to those goons of Kyrus when he was surrounded by enemy mages alone with nothing left but a sword and one arm. They lasered my poor bro and then he woke up in a soft bed surrounded by servants inside the royal palace of Kyrus, the kingdom that destroyed him. Yeah, bro is inside the empire of the dudes who cooked his crew. He's about to burn this place from inside out and kill every single nigga in sight, cause he's in the body of Callion, the third prince. Problem is that this dude is the weakest, most hated, most pathetic member of the royal family. At least he got this maid that I thought was a girl at first but is just a breedable femboy. Right after bro was eating and chillin' thinking about his new life. But in this house all three princes eat together by the king's orders. When this dude named Planche who thinks he's on One Piece or some shit with that jacket over shoulder at 7 AM walks in. Our boy used to be that dude that just lowered his head, but bro looked dead in the eyes and said, "Yo bitch, what's up?" Planche, being that well-mannered dude he is, suddenly just grabbed a knife and threw at our boy side femboy to pierce his skull. But bro just caught midair at like nothing, walked to his side and told him, "Careful bro, next time it can end in your face." Brother was just stunned. Did I got roasted by the trashiest dude of this place. Now things aren't that smooth because something almost went wrong. When the knife came at him, he nearly used aura on instinct. The reflexes of an aura warrior who'd spent his whole life on a battlefield almost exposed him in a dining room. But then he felt something he didn't expect, a sharp pain in his chest. Not from the knife, from the inside. So he checked, and what he found changed everything. 3 mana circles around his heart. This body isn't just some weak prince, it's a mage's body. 3 circles already formed. That's serious talent, but also almost a curse. Bro spent his whole life grabbing thick swords and now he has to cast balls, which is a problem, because every time he tries to use mana, his chest feels like it's being crushed. His body is losing weight rapidly. He can barely run 3 laps around the palace lake without almost collapsing. His nose starts bleeding randomly. The royal tailor, the guy who measures him regularly, says he's getting thinner every time. A body with 3 mana circles, and the royal dragon bloodline blessing should be healing itself constantly. It should be getting stronger, not falling apart. But that's happening because this kid is being poisoned. And it's not a small dose. Whatever's in his system is strong enough that without the dragon bloodline burning through it 24/7, he'd already be dead. This isn't some random assassination attempt. Someone has been poisoning RG day in day out. But who? Bro thinks in the original timeline this boy died at 15. They said he tried to poison the queen and then hanged himself. What if that story was always a lie? Speaking of suspects, it was then that our bro smelled someone coming. Literal dog behavior. This bitch is Celeste, the current queen. From the eye color must be his stepmother, and holy shit she's perfect for that stepson niche with those thick lips. And of course she goes directly to our boy, saying that lately he's looking very grown and healthy. My bro drops a punline on her and says, "I didn't grow much, you'll see how much more I can grow in the future." Yeah, that's the direction I like my stories to go. Words that made the atmosphere turn heavy. The Viscount said he barely recognized him since he didn't usually even show his face. He'd definitely become a very tall man. That's when the queen cut him off. Who would have thought? The Viscount really is a lapdog, just like the rumors said. The queen asked why Planche hadn't told her about the horse that doesn't obey him at all. It would have been good if he'd reported it. But Planche said she already knew. Soleil said he'd lost control of the reins, and her son said the horse was useless. He got up and left the table right away, leaving his cursed mother furious. 3 weeks later, it was time for the king's birthday celebration. The king, who's basically his wife's doormat, like everything in that palace. The common people are excited about the festivities. Everyone wants to see the princes. While they were getting the kid ready, the tailor got really worried. Blood started running from Killian's nose. All the servants panicked over the sudden nosebleed. The butler asked for compresses to help. The prince said it was nothing, that he'd just been sleeping badly. But since the tailor measures him often, he said the boy had lost even more weight. Killian tried to change the subject, and said he'd been exercising too much. That's why he'd dropped so much weight. As soon as the tailor left, the butler quietly asked if today was the day. No matter what happens, before rumors about Cillian's health spread, he needs to meet Ellen, not Musk. Because of delays in the king's schedule, he'll have to see his sons one by one. The kid doesn't have time to waste, and wishes his father would just talk to everyone at once. A private meeting wasn't what he'd been expecting. King Romain is reading documents, and the prince announces himself, but the king acts like he didn't even notice, like he ignored the whole thing. That's unbelievably rude, Kellyan thought, until the king told him to sit. The king asked generic questions and said his son looked fine. Suddenly it all made sense to Kellyan. Now he knows why the king wants to see his sons alone. This way he saves time for real, because he doesn't have to actually talk or ask anything. What a mess of a family. A father who doesn't care, apathetic brothers, a wonderful place. Plancho's just arrived, and he's already drunk, with zero manners. The person most interested in that meeting is the queen, who has enough power to keep her own husband under her thumb. And in the middle of all these people, someone wants the prince dead. It's time for him to work out who the killer is. Because of the celebration, the prince showed up in front of everyone looking like someone different. His presence is already outshining Prince Plancho, who's just a drunk. The nobles are talking about it, starting rumors. Kellyan finally entered the hall, leaving all those background nobles impressed. The rumors are real. The black-haired, red-eyed prince who looks like Sifanian. He cut his hair, his face is fully visible, and he's even wearing a crimson brooch. It's a quiet statement that he's done hiding. The butler went up to him to ask something. He wanted to know why everyone was staring. He even thought it might be because the prince was dressed so well. Kellyan knows those jewels are drawing attention. It was all the tailor's doing. The butler's family is also from Kairos, but from a small inland town. The prince asked if they'd come to the capital, and the butler said they'd need an invitation. Since the prince got too personal, it looked like the butler was about to snap, but he tried to change the subject. The prince is waiting for the right moment, because there's someone there he wants to meet. He asked if the butler knows why that place is called Siegfried Hall. It was named after the first patriarch of that surname, one of the great heroes. They've been loyal to the royal family for 500 years, defending that territory. In his past life, the prince liked hearing that story, and the person he wants to meet is in the middle of that hall, Duke Siegfried, who looks incredibly powerful. Long, loyal traditions. Those are the kind of people the prince likes. Using a bit of mana, he tried to see if the man was sharp, and he got noticed immediately. The test went exactly as expected. The butler realized the duke was looking at the prince. He's one of the 5 great sword masters on the continent. For now, the prince will act like nothing happened. In the middle of the hall, the king thanked the guests for coming. Kellyan was already outside with his butler. The kid managed to tame that stubborn horse, discovering it's actually gentle and smart. Now they needed to go to the main gates. Someone had been stopped from entering. Kellyan quickly realized what was going on. It was the person he'd wanted to find. Ellen doesn't have an invitation to the party, so he's being kept out. The guards don't seem to know he's an important mage. Even so, they're blocking him. Ellen thinks guests get treated based on how they look. The prince realizes the mage is doing it on purpose, like he's looking for a reason not to step onto those grounds, already ready to leave. The butler said they can't follow him because they'd be disobeying the king's orders. Kellyan can't lose the mage's trail, so he told his butler to hold the guards back, then spurred his horse toward Ellen. The knights ordered the prince to stop immediately. The king's order forbids anyone from leaving, but the kid jumped past them on his black horse, heading outside the fortress. Now the butler has to do something to stop the guards, because he got a clear order to prevent that from happening. Full of energy, he told the knights to stop immediately, because the prince had permission from Siegfried. Finally, the butler revealed who he really is. His name is Siroyan, Duke Siegfried's eldest son. Later, someone is laughing hard about what happened. It's the butler's father, impressed by his son's cleverness. When he left their lands, he was just a little kid. It was a good decision. The boy is afraid the relationship between the duke and the king might get strained, but Siegfried is sure nothing will happen because the king won't ask any questions. He overthinks everything. If the prince got help from that family, he definitely won't be punished. There's a delicate balance of power there, so it'll all be ignored like it never happened. Whatever reason drove the young prince outside, Ellen noticed he was being followed, like he was about to get criticized. So he asked what the third prince of Kairos was doing, chasing after him. Kellyan already knew that once you reach the 7th circle, aging slows down. The kid said it was late and asked if the mage was really leaving. The mage said when he tried to open that door, there was a huge barrier. That irritated Kellyan a little, because the mage didn't even seem that interested in staying. Kellyan said he tried the wrong door because there was already a place open for him. The mage realized he was being called out, and instead of listening to excuses, he saw he was dealing with a very sharp prince, someone who doesn't seem like he's only 14. That's when the mage noticed something. He stepped closer, genuinely worried. The moment he touched the prince's hands, energy started to rise, making the prince feel a sharp pain in his chest. The mage's mana flowed through the prince's body. The contact got so intense that Kellyan had to pull away. The mage said that even with doors shut, you can't completely block the wind. The kid's condition had been exposed to this master. Kellyan said there's a limit to how much mana he can use, but that isn't his real problem. The question is whether the mage has already figured it out. Ellen kept looking at him with interest. Even though they're dragon descendants, Kairos looks down on mages, and Ellen's presence had been completely ignored. But now he believes fate brought him to this boy, so he asked why the prince wanted to meet him. Kellyan knows he can't lie now or he'll be found out. Very politely, he said he wanted to talk because he believes his life will be in danger soon. The third prince is hated by everyone. His existence is surrounded by enemies. Ellen put a barrier around the two of them that blocked all sound, and he did it without any chant at all. Thinking it over, the mage asked what the boy's goal really is to avoid what's coming, or to get rid of the real problem. Callian said the priority is stopping something worse from happening, for now, and if he has to take the throne to get what he wants, he'll do it. Ellen seemed to like that confidence. A young prince who needs a mentor to reach his goals, that's genuinely interesting. That's why the mage asked to be invited again. The prince knelt in front of him, introducing himself to his new mentor. With the mage's ego properly stroked, he agreed to save the prince. Back with the butler, he asked his father if nobody knows about his real identity, because it would be a problem if it leaked. Siegfried is very confident, but his son stays worried. He wanted to know how Leah has been lately. His father said she's doing great, handling the family's internal affairs, the position the boy abandoned. Whenever he wants to stop playing at being a butler, he can come back anytime. Realizing he won't see his son for a long time, the Duke listened as the boy said they'll see each other again in 3 months. Siegfried took that as his son leaving his current post. The boy said that soon a young master will turn 15. His father asked if he knows what their surname means. They're known as the Elephants of Kairos. They never wanted the throne, but they're extremely powerful. They're the kings of beasts and nobody can lay a hand on them. After saying that, Siegfried started smiling, saying their name carries real power. Then he told his son to do whatever he wanted, which made the boy genuinely happy. He said next time, he shouldn't make him worry so much. The butler fixed his clothes to return, very formal. He said goodbye to his father, saying they'd see each other soon. Siegfried thought his son was stubborn. Typical of the family. He was also thinking about what the prince did earlier. If he can pull something like that off, he must have grown a lot. Now the Duke wants to know what the third prince is planning. The next day, a carriage caught everyone's attention. It had an emblem with 7 roses and a silver staff. People wanted to know why that family was visiting Kairos, but the reason seemed obvious. They have a good relationship with the king, and rumors were spreading. Ellen had just stepped down from the carriage. His young disciple had made it happen. The night before, they talked about exactly this. The mage needed to arrive at 9 o'clock. Competing with the Brizon family's influence won't be easy. It's time to shake up the nobles. The servants of that house welcomed the mage politely and said the king was already waiting. In the meeting, the king was surprised by the mage's presence, and Ellen asked for a place to stay. To compete with his wife's power, the king knows having that mage on his side would be very useful. It's surprising he showed up there first, and it made the king suspicious. The mage said that the night before he found a small black cat with red eyes. He realized it was very smart and decided to teach it a few things, but he still didn't have anywhere to stay. The king asked what he was going to teach, and the answer couldn't be more obvious: magic. But the environment also needs to help that little cat improve, so the owner of those lands needs to contribute too. A bit uneasy, the king asked if the mage can really do that. Callian will be his disciple. Nobody can stop it. The king decided to cooperate. That place is already a mess. One more thing won't make it worse. Still, the king was intrigued, because he'd heard the third son had nothing special about him. That surprised the mage. Even the boy's health condition is unusual, because it's hard to find the cause. To make it worse, the king only talks about things he's heard, like he doesn't even know his own son. So the mage asked if the father knows the young prince's height, something basic. From the king's silence, the mage immediately realized he couldn't answer. Then he told him attention can be poison, and indifference can be medicine. But in this case, saying you're busy is just an excuse. The king got irritated but decided to let it go, since the mage still doesn't know how to behave as the boy's mentor. He said it's ridiculous to have to explain this, but he cares a lot about the young prince, insisting he's exceptionally special. Just as their conversation was about to be interrupted, a magical barrier was summoned. Ellen told the king to pay attention. The boy looked sick. Even the clothes he put on had been urgently altered, since he'd lost weight. He can barely get himself up when he wakes. If the king keeps doing nothing but watch, he's going to lose that something he claims is so precious. It's almost lunchtime, and the young prince still hasn't left his room to eat breakfast. The butler said he'd handle it for him and bring some tea. Our protagonist stays in bed in a lot of pain even while he's asleep. Watching that, the butler figured the day before must have been exhausting. That's when the mage showed up and saw the boy still hadn't woken up. The mage's presence threw the butler off. But then he was completely terrified when Ellen appeared out of nowhere. Siegfried Jr. tried to stop the mage from getting closer. He told him to give our protagonist some time because his health was fragile. But the mage recognized that boy right away. They'd met a few years earlier, and he knew he was looking at the baby elephant. Looks like some people know who the butler's father is. The butler swore his disguise was perfect, but he still got found out. Our protagonist finally woke up, but he had no idea how many hours he'd been resting. He was told he had a visitor. Callian saw who the mage was, and the boy received a small gift from him, some pills he had to take every day. Ellen said the boy was dealing with 2 problems. The first was that he couldn't control his own mana. The second was that his body was losing weight way too fast. Callian was impressed by his teacher's ability to notice things. Ellen asked if the boy really had the power of the blessing. Callian said yes, because of it, he should recover faster and have an affinity for magic. But somehow his regeneration seemed messed up. More and more intrigued, Ellen asked if the boy had never found that strange. With healing mixed with magical power, In theory, the boy's heart should be strong. His teacher agreed. The blessing hadn't disappeared, and his heart didn't have any issues either. Actually, his regeneration was being used constantly, just somewhere else. That statement completely shocked our protagonist. He immediately realized he was being poisoned, and if it weren't for his blessing, he would have been dead a long time ago. Fighting a poison that strong was pushing his body to its limit. Because of that, using mana was extremely difficult. Our protagonist knows that originally, that boy was the victim of a murder, but he'd already been getting poisoned. Something extremely well planned. Knowing all of this fills him with rage. Ellen noticed the negative intent coming off him. A 14-year-old shouldn't be capable of that. Callian believed that little pill was the antidote. His teacher said he'd made it in a hurry, but it should be enough. Our protagonist started thinking about what would happen if he took it while still taking in the poison. That worried his teacher, because then the treatment wouldn't work as well. Keeping the poison in his system would be very dangerous, but the boy already had an idea who the culprit was. It had to be the tea he drank every morning. Since he drank it in front of everyone, it would be easy to confirm he'd ingested it. Maybe the boy discovered that in his past life, and that's what sped up his assassination. Things are very different now. Callian needs to find out what's going on while keeping everything secret. His teacher asked if that was the only option. The boy needed to confirm the tea was the source of the poison. That could put his servants in danger, because the culprit does it regularly. Confident they'll never be caught. Knowing the butler's real identity, the teacher said he'd be safe, but he understood Callian's fear and wanted to know what the next steps would be, somewhere mysterious. A disgusting old man said that to use his trump card he needed to receive something. The next day, Callian wanted his teacher to accompany him outside. Some servants went to find Prince Planche, because the queen wanted to see him. She said the boy was very late, but he didn't seem to care at all. Drunk again. The young man drank some water and told his mother to just say what she came to say and leave. The queen had heard our protagonist had gotten a mentor, Ellen the Seventh Circle Mage. That news was spreading among the nobles. Planche couldn't care less. The queen told him he had to appreciate the investment she'd made. It was time to get ready. A lot of eyes would be watching the heir from now on, so he'd better not disappoint them. Planche got furious and threw a cup at the floor. Even though he hurt himself, he kicked the servants out. Now he was more and more irritated with our boy, the source of his frustration. Because of the king's birthday celebration, the royal party was touring the capital, and his children were traveling with him too, making the people extremely excited. Callian was the one the crowd most wanted to see. The butler asked if he was feeling okay. At least his face looked a bit healthier. Callian said he'd been resting well. Thanks to the antidote he was taking, breathing was much easier, and the pain in his heart was gone. Unfortunately, the schedule that day would be long, which made the butler very worried. Still, the protagonist was healthy enough to see his subjects. In the middle of the crowd, a man tried to hide. Our protagonist noticed those mysterious figures. He would never forget them. They were people from his past life. That knight who sacrificed himself to protect him, Kiri. But a hooded man disappeared into the crowd. Our protagonist tried to follow on horseback, but the butler stopped him. Callian tried to explain that he needed to go after them, but they were already gone, and it would look terrible to abandon the caravan at that moment. One thing he was sure of, he would meet his friend again. At the end of the route, a noble welcomed the king and his family. He said he'd prepared a performance to celebrate their arrival, Baron Melfier, the one responsible for organizing this outing and all the stress our boy had felt. In his past life, a horseback outing was organized by that baron, and one of the king's sons got hurt, which led to Melfier being hanged. It's a shame because he seems like a pretty polite background character. The hall was already prepared to receive the guests. Our boy had already spotted the chandelier that was going to fall, for an event held for the king himself. It was weird that the knights hadn't checked the safety, but thinking about the commander, Callian realized he shouldn't expect much from them. He decided he'd give that background character a chance to live. When the baron approached him, Callian said he was worried about that chandelier and ordered it to be inspected. Obviously, that message left the noble totally confused. The horse performance was happening in the arena. The noble was like a kid, sitting beside the king. He didn't want to miss this chance for anything, but then he noticed our protagonist's expression and started thinking he really should have checked the ceiling. When he inspected the place, the baron found a badly worn rope. If it weren't for the young prince's warning, something terrible could have happened, but he'd been warned about what was going to happen, like our protagonist knew the future. Callian noticed the noble acted very wisely. The question was why. Bryson had guards in that area enough to cause a huge commotion. That more alcoholic prince said the noble didn't know his place. The performance continued in the arena. Looking at our protagonist, the drunk prince said he was disgusted by his bloodline. Everyone there heard it, and it only made our protagonist more motivated, because he never thought the crazy king from his other life would turn out to be such a useless person. It was time to find out how far the queen would go in this situation. She didn't like what happened either, because she'd already warned her son not to be stupid. Only then, after looking at her own son, did she understand he'd done it on purpose. But that day was special. Many nobles were present. It was time to make a decision. The show for the nobles finally ended. The accident that should have happened was prevented. The queen stayed very quiet, like she hadn't planned anything at all. Maybe that accident really wasn't part of her conspiracy. That had been debated in his past life too. It could have been driven by outside forces. It seemed designed to be discovered, a direct attack on royalty. Brizen benefited the most from the fallout. As they left, our protagonist asked the butler where that baron's wealth came from. He learned the man had a diamond mine. If the baron was removed from the board, Brizen would thrive in that market too. Our protagonist was putting the pieces together, but he decided to watch a little longer. He thought about pressuring the baron a bit, since our boy had saved his life. So he told the butler to cancel all plans after the performance. He said the comments he'd heard from his own brother were intense, and he was shaken. That was why he wouldn't be able to take part in the rest of the schedule. The king was in his office, thinking about what happened. Since the mage had scolded him directly, he started remembering the boy's mother, her final moments, until servants interrupted, announcing the queen's arrival. One maid said she'd bring tea for them. The queen noticed someone had visited before she did. The king stopped the tea, saying the queen would be leaving soon. Getting straight to it, he asked what brought her there. She asked what would happen to Brizen after that event, but she was worried about her son's behavior. It could damage his place in the line of succession. She praised the day's festival and suggested the baron should be rewarded. The king realized she already had something in mind. Smiling, she brought up Brizen's exclusive right to supply horses to the royal family. To the king, she was giving up a very important asset, which only backed up what Ellen had said. Ellen said the queen wouldn't give up the royal guard over that, because she wasn't desperate, but she would hand over something valuable, and the king should act like he hadn't expected it. After hearing the proposal, the king said he would enter Planche in the next event. That made the queen deeply happy. That night, the king came to dinner accompanied by his son, to reward the baron for what he'd done that day. The nobles already knew that was the deal between the king and the queen, because of Planche's actions. Because the protagonist's fame was growing, his room got flooded with gifts. His rival's influence was shrinking, but he didn't need that kind of offer except for the baron's gifts. He would donate everything. It didn't take long for the butler to find the baron's gifts, a very flashy necklace made with red stones. It was so big it looked like it was made for a horse. That confused our boy, and he learned that when the baron approached, the butler had said our boy liked the black horse. That's why he received the necklace. It had to be the baron testing his intentions. If he accepted this gift, he'd get another one later. Talion thought the man didn't understand the value of his own life. Those jewels weren't enough, so he decided to send a message. He wanted to know the value of the necklace because he was going to buy it. The butler didn't understand the offer, and our boy said he wasn't fascinated by it. Actually, a very sinister plant had caught his attention. It was a gift from the Mages Association, and our boy found that really strange, but it had to be valuable because it came with an explanatory letter. When the plant dies, it releases its pollen. Our boy seemed to understand why it mattered. He said the gift would stay in his room, because he had a very interesting idea he wanted to try. Later, he deliberately spilled the tea and pretended he'd burned his hand. The butler asked some maids to clean it up. Some of the tea spilled onto the plant. That made the butler worry the plant might be affected by the tea. The protagonist said it was fine. It's not like the tea was poisoned. Way too specific of a comment, and it scared the maid. With his teacher beside him, our boy thanked him for the help he'd been getting. Thanks to the antidote's effect, Ellen noticed our protagonist looked much healthier and much happier. Ellen also wanted to take a walk like that. It was the first time in a long while. Callian asked if the king had allowed it, but the king probably didn't even know what was going on, since he was always busy. Our boy hurried out, leaving behind a very worried butler. The mage asked if he was still taking the medicine. Callian promised he was doing exactly what he'd been told. The person delivering the poison was very worried, since the plant had been used as bait. That surprised the mage because it was an interesting strategy. The gift our boy received had been used brilliantly. Now they needed to split up again, since the protagonist wanted to do this alone. The Mages Association was on a nearby street. That's where the teacher would be ready to help him. Soon they'd meet again, once they did what needed to be done. Some blacksmiths were working hard. Our boy got a dagger to defend himself. It would be useful from now on if he was attacked. What he needed now was more information. In his past life, several agents were sent into the field for that purpose. Trained assassins got missions like that, assigned through the King of Secretia. In his past life, our protagonist did the same thing. On that dark street, he was completely unprotected, and he knew the assassins from his kingdom were very capable. Some drunk men were approaching him. He had to be careful not to reveal his true identity, otherwise he could trigger an attack sooner than expected. The truth was, his exotic appearance appealed to him, so he had to be even more cautious. He finally entered a very peculiar shop, much bigger than he expected. Inside, the seller asked if the boy was looking for a carrier pigeon, but he said he didn't need those birds, which looked like they were sleeping peacefully. It even seemed like they'd come from far away and were exhausted, and there was no better place for them than that shop. More and more intrigued, the old man asked what brought the young man there. Kallian said he needed to feed his birds. In the blink of an eye, he was attacked. The blade passed close to his hood, and the old man said he hadn't sold birds recently, so he was very careful and suspicious. Kallian quickly realized that wasn't an ordinary old man. It would be hard to fight him in that situation, so our boy decided to talk instead. He said the birds he was looking for had left a nest far away, so they needed food. They hadn't been sold. Birds was a code name for secret agents responsible for gathering information. Not even Secretia's agents knew everyone out in the field, so information wouldn't leak. The old man asked if the boy was someone's bird. Kalyan even considered using his former father's name to pretend he was a working bird, claiming he was there on Nebulade's behalf. That left the old man very surprised. Everything was going well so far. Our boy asked for a bit of food, because this bird needs to work. The old man immediately told him to follow. He led our boy into a secret room and said the young man must be a new recruit, and that he should remember the old man's codename, White Eagle. Our protagonist said he was Red Swan. It was time for him to get the information. For each piece of information, he had to hand over an item, payment up front. Our boy didn't expect to be charged before even saying what he was looking for. It could be a trap. But the old man said the price was fixed. After paying, he got the information he wanted. Looking over that scroll, Red Swan started wondering if it was really correct, but based on what he'd asked for, that was what the old man had to give him. Before leaving the shop, he was warned to be careful, because that place is pretty cruel. Our protagonist agreed, thinking that nothing there was more dangerous than White Eagle himself. On the way back to the castle, our boy saw several hooded men. He needed to cross that bridge, but he was stopped. He asked what it meant. One of the men apologized and said he had to wait because the dead were making their final journey. Only then did he realize it was a funeral ritual. Our boy got off his horse to show respect. Funeral customs are very different in that nation. They place red flowers into the river so the dead won't lose their way. In his past life, they did it with white flowers placed on the grave. They bloomed at night, a sign that the dead would never meet the living. Our boy started thinking about it, whether in his past life anyone had mourned him or whether time rewound before that happened. Maybe he was the dead person who'd lost his own way. Someone thanked him for stopping out of respect. Now he could continue. Back on his horse, he pulled the hood away from his face and said he would say a prayer for that soul. And the man who had stopped him noticed his face. That man's companions saw he was distracted and asked why. Arkson said he would remember the Prince of Secretia very well because that's what happened in his past life. Answering his companions, he said the young man seemed like a kind person. On his way, Kalyan saw several signs with the name Sisfanian and thought it was a bit over the top, especially since the last one looked like a bar. The stories from his past life about that city were true, about the followers of Sisfanian. A bald man was going to take our boy somewhere more private, but Kalyan said that wasn't where he wanted to go. He wanted the 4th floor of that building. The bald man was immediately surprised and quickly offered to show him the way. Kalyan was now in an empty hall. He saw a small object hanging on the wall. When he was with White Eagle, he'd asked for just one piece of information, where illegal business happens in Kairos. After he triggered that strange object, a secret door opened in the wall. There was a staircase leading underground, where our boy would gather more information. Some people were gambling down there, but that wasn't what he was looking for. Deeper inside, the illegal fights took place. People cheered intensely for their favorite fighters. The first match ended. The winner was Stoneface. While the loser's body was dragged away, the bets were paid out. The smell of blood filled the place. That was where ordinary people threw away their humanity for the sake of brutality. To our boy, it was disgusting and pathetic. He was approached to pay the entry fee. At that moment, Kalyan noticed a silver-haired girl. It looked like she was mute, and she was trying to guide him to where he should go next. He noticed the tips of her ears had been cut, and she didn't look comfortable in those clothes. Around the necks of those girls was a tracking device so they couldn't escape. The mute girl gestured again, pointing to the number 27. It seemed like she wanted him to place a bet now, so he blended in with the crowd until he could get what he came for. The rule there was simple: if you win your bet, you get money fast. Our boy made a small fortune. Some men started talking about it. It was time for a special fight against an undefeated fighter. So far, his opponent was a rookie. This was the person Kalyan wanted to find, the one who in his past life said he'd been trapped in a place where he had to fight to survive until his sister died. The knight Kiri, but right now he was still a slave, a gladiator, the real treasure Kalyan had come to find. Without hesitating, Kalyan bet everything he had on that fighter, leaving the mute girl stunned, a risky bet that left the onlookers shocked, thinking the boy had to be crazy and they weren't wrong. Up to now, Kiri hadn't won anything. A veteran gambler said what our boy did was reckless. It wasn't worth betting everything on someone who'd never won, but our boy wouldn't budge. He told the mute girl to make sure the bet went through. After that, the veteran gambler did what his conscience told him to do, warn the rookie. That fight was going to be a complete massacre. Even inside the cage, Kiri realized what had happened. The undefeated fighter said that crazy bettor was about to lose everything. The shackles holding them were unlocked. The fight had barely started, and Kiri was already forced to defend against devastating blows. Every block hurt almost as much as taking a clean hit. The gladiator landed a strike to Kiri's stomach, making him spit blood from the impact. Now the protagonist started to get nervous. Without a sword, he knew Kiri wasn't that dangerous, but he believed in that fierce fighter's potential. The gray-haired knight's strikes weren't fast enough. He was getting crushed, slowly. There was nothing to do during that beating. The final blow was headed for his face, until the protagonist shouted to Kiri that he shouldn't expose his shoulder during the opponent's attack. The gladiator listened, managing to dodge a strike aimed at his skull and finding a good opening to counterattack, crushing the thug's ribs. If the guy's bones weren't made of rubber, they definitely cracked. Kiri turned into a dentist, pulling teeth without anesthesia. To everyone's shock, Kiri got his first victory. No one could explain how it happened. It shouldn't have been possible. While desperate screams rose from the people who'd lost money, Kiri looked at our boy. Kalian couldn't hide how happy he was. Then a very suspicious bald man said someone wanted to talk to our boy and told him to come along. In a private room, someone said our boy had real talent. He'd turned 3 coins into a total of 6,000. And that was a big problem for a betting house. That man didn't want to pay him. Kalian thought they were going to propose some kind of deal, but they were even dumber than they looked. The mobster asked what the boy could offer in this situation. Our protagonist said that if he took the hood off his face, things would get very bad for him. The mobster doubted the threat. It was time to rip that hood off by force, but one of the mobster's hands was violently pierced. That made our boy ask what was going on. He thought he was talking to dangerous criminals. That was when they realized they were dealing with someone truly unhinged. To their relief, our boy said he wasn't interested in the money. He'd rather take the gladiator Kiri home. But the mobster wasn't happy about that, because the slave had started bringing in money. Still, within seconds he realized that if he didn't agree, things would turn ugly. He started thinking it would be easy to see what that boy could do using his men. With an even more destructive cut, the protagonist made it crystal clear who was in charge there. He said he was willing to take the coins and even that man's life if he was crossed. It was time for the mobster to decide. After that aura strike, the answer was obvious. He ordered his men to bring Kiri to the room immediately. What he didn't know was that it had been a bluff. Our boy couldn't repeat that strike. His weakened body wouldn't handle it. A thug said there was a big problem. Kiri wouldn't leave unless his sister came with him. Our protagonist remembered the rest of the story. His knight had lost something precious in that place. Kalian started to show he was getting impatient. That made the mobster move faster, saying everything would be prepared so they could leave as soon as possible. But our boy held out his hand in a threatening way. He wanted the entry fee back, the amount he'd paid to get in. Now that they were back in the dark alley, Kiri was a little worried. Coincidentally, his sister was the mute girl. They thanked our protagonist for the help, but they couldn't understand why he'd helped them. Kalian handed his cloak to the girl and told them to be less suspicious, because he didn't have any bad intentions. That was when his face was recognized, the face of the third prince. Kiri apologized for having suspected someone so important. Our boy told him not to bow his head like that, because they didn't need to do that in his presence. Those siblings had elf blood, they were hybrids, and their lives had already been doomed. Taking the opportunity, our boy said that exposing the shoulder like that is something beginners in fencing do all the time. Now the question was whether Kiri wanted to become a knight. The young man said he wanted to become a sword that could protect everything he cared about, not a knight. Our boy said the first step was to work as his shield. If he wanted to keep going down that path, he should come find him. And he gave the young man a sword. Kiri still didn't know why he'd been given something so important. Kalian, smiling, said he needed a good sword. It was time for him to repay everything he'd received in his past life. Ellen was reviewing the most recent events, and how our boy had saved that baron's life. The prince knew the chandelier was going to fall. Our boy went to meet his master. Ellen asked if he'd gotten into trouble, because some of his clothes were missing. The young man said something had happened, but it wasn't a fight. His teacher understood it. Must have been a difficult task. Kalian admitted it had been a very long day. He'd found his knight and set a trap to find whoever was poisoning him. Even so, he was still really anxious, maybe because he'd done too much in too little time. With the help of magic, Ellen began pouring some tea. Our boy said it finally looked like a mage's office. His teacher asked if he'd been expecting some mysterious soup made with monster meat, and honestly, Kalian had expected something more impressive. The room was very ordinary, and the dagger without a sheath was a strange decoration. But the boy quickly realized what kind of tool it was. Ellen asked if the prince knew why it was there, because it shouldn't be in his room. With a simple movement of his fingers, the dagger started to move, heading straight for our boy. A bit of blood hit the floor. Ellen noticed that even with a damaged body, our boy still had good reflexes. He defended himself, but he'd pushed himself too hard. That was a magical tool made by Sifanian. It copies the hidden weapon of your opponent. Basically, it was a warning. Our boy realized the attack had been a bluff. Ellen confirmed with his own eyes that besides knowing how to use a sword, the boy could use aura. From the first time he saw him, he was sure their meeting had been strange. But even more absurd things kept happening. The boy didn't match what they thought they knew about him. When he learned he was being poisoned, instead of being scared, he was filled with rage, and after the incident with the Baron, it was time to tell his teacher the truth. Ellen used healing magic on the boy's body. His teacher probably already suspected his identity, but it was more likely he was trying to believe him. So our protagonist said he wasn't Kalian. His real name was Baron Secretia. My god, I didn't expect him to reveal that he broke rule number 1 of every regressor story. Now the two of them talked more about the artifact called the Axis of Time. It seemed the real Kalian truly wasn't alive anymore, the professor believed. Our protagonist wasn't sure. He still felt the presence of someone else. He hadn't been sure before because it was so confusing. Ellen remembered the first time they met, our boy said he wanted something above the royal throne. Now Ellen wanted to know what that was. Kalian revealed he wanted to stop the war from happening. He didn't know why Planchet was after the Axis of Time, but if the root of the problem stayed, history would repeat itself. Ellen asked whether our boy wanted to act because of his own motivation, or because of his brother Chase. They needed to figure that out. Chase was the only heir of the other kingdom. There was no one named Baron in this reality. That information shocked our boy. He didn't expect that he wouldn't exist in this timeline or anywhere, which was foolish of him, because he exists right now. Even so, the boy fell into a bizarre existential crisis, believing something had gone wrong, maybe because of the artifact's power. Now he tried to understand why he was in this body, since he felt the old Kallian's presence slowly fading away. Our boy even wondered if someone had entered the body that used to be Baron, and he came to the conclusion that there can't be two versions of him in the same place, so he must have taken over the real Kallian's body. His teacher said Chase was already preparing to take the throne. The future of this reality was being changed. It wasn't for the third prince of Kairos to worry about those things now, because Chase would follow his own story. Baron realized he shouldn't cling to the past anymore. He understood his teacher's concern, but he was going to make one thing clear. His teacher's fear wouldn't come true. Because when he woke up in that land, he completely got rid of everything that made him Baron. Words so heavy they left Elon stunned. Now the protagonist asked if his teacher was okay. After hearing all that, Elon, even though he was confused, still didn't understand his student's worry. And from the beginning, he'd made his alliance with one person. Our boy. Outside, Kallian asked if his teacher already knew about the axis of time. From his reaction, it seemed he knew something. Elon said something had happened last year. Chase had asked him the same question. All he knew was that the artifact wasn't made by humans, and a month ago he learned it had disappeared from the kingdom, possibly on the day of our boy's regression. That information scared Kallian a little. He didn't know why the artifact might have vanished, but that wasn't a question that could be answered now. However, there was someone who might have that answer, someone the prince would meet soon. Elon pointed to the statue of Siphanian, and our boy realized his coming-of-age ceremony is happening soon. Rosalita is the name of the event, when royal family members have to find Siphanian's empty nest, and inside it speak with her will. But to do that you have to make it there alive, meaning he needs to figure out who's trying to poison him. Kallian believes that just this alone should have already led to someone getting caught. Back in his room, he went to examine that plant. Even though the butler was worried, everything went exactly the way the protagonist planned. Now it was time to find something seriously cool. Heading straight to the terrace, the butler questioned why they needed to go out there since it was freezing outside. That flower he'd received as a gift, when it dies, its pollen spreads through the air and very few people know it has that trait. The tea was poured somewhere everyone could see. Kallian watched everyone's reactions closely. That was a deadly poison. Hardly anyone would survive it, and the plant should definitely have died. And yet, it was completely healthy, like someone had swapped the specimen. Finally, the butler understood what was going on. The pollen from that plant was drifting through the air. A trail left behind showed where the plant might be hidden, and it would lead the protagonist straight to the culprit, pointing toward the palace of Hesia, where coincidentally the queen of that kingdom lives. The protagonist watched the rain fall through the window. The butler slowly approached. The boy asked if he'd rested well, looking perfectly healthy. That left the butler stunned. He wasn't used to being greeted like that in the morning. The boy said he'd woken up early. That was genuinely unheard of for the butler, and the boy kept a close eye on the cup of tea. As he drank, he noticed it tasted different than usual. Celise had increased the poison dose. The boy asked if there were any events that week with all the nobles. The butler told him there would be a conference next week, and right after that, a huge banquet. The perfect day to stop drinking that poison. The protagonist took the antidote right after the tea, which made the butler curious. He asked what it was, and the boy said it was just vitamins. Since his body had been getting weaker, he should take them. Now the butler grew thoughtful, staring at the teacup. The whole thing made him deeply uneasy. After what happened at the horse presentation, Planche stopped coming to breakfast. For the protagonist, that was great. It removed obstacles from his schedule. Taking advantage of his second brother being there, Kallian said the flowers would bloom soon. A heavy silence fell between them, and the blonde boy decided to leave. Then the butler asked why the boy had brought that up. Kallian said he'd seen some roses while walking, and it reminded him that Randall used to grow roses. There was no hidden meaning behind it. Later that day, the protagonist trained a bit more. His physical condition kept getting worse, and he was sure that if he stopped training, his body would deteriorate even faster. He still didn't know how his master showed up there, but the teacher said he'd spoken with the king. That made the boy say he had two questions. He needed the identities of two people, nothing complicated for his master. The second favor was to investigate some nobles who might be involved in this, especially the Brizan family, which his teacher had already expected. That wasn't hard either, but the boy was giving his master a lot of orders. Kallian said the poison was even more concentrated now. He'd really found the culprit. Even the teacher already suspected who it might be. It must be hard to hide something like that from a great mage, and since it was an important matter, it was the perfect situation for Ellen to gain even more influence. The mage thought he was going to be used as a shield, but the boy didn't want that. He wanted to use him like a weapon. He still remembered his past life, and the White Demon Army made up only of mages. In the future, Kallian wanted a battalion made only of that kind of soldier. The teacher was intrigued, and said mages aren't knights, and they're hard to train. But the protagonist insisted it was possible, which left his teacher deep in thought. Romain had been ignored when he had that idea because people thought it was impossible, yet he pulled it off. Still, he died soon after, under very suspicious circumstances. The Mage Corporation really did become a military force, used by Planchet. Things were going to be different now because the Bryson family wouldn't get in the boy's way, and he wanted to use the poison tea to negotiate with Queen Celise. Ellen wanted to know how that would be put into practice. All the boy could say was that things would happen soon. It was vague and it made the teacher uneasy. Pulling something hidden in his sleeve, the boy said it should be used when the queen made a mistake. Then the negotiation would begin. The infiltrated maids increased the poison dose, but the queen was still furious. She was already hearing too many rumors and it all made her deeply irritated. Someone approached the two of them. It was the queen's son who was also a tool in her hands. He came to tell her not to worry about it, but she said he wasn't capable of deciding anything. Even so, she kept suffering. Blanche stormed off feeling useless. The queen saw her own son as weak, and she was going to pave the way for him to become king in the future. On the day of the celebration at the palace, Kiri noticed her sister woke up in a great mood. She was excited about what was going to happen too, and using sign language she said they were going to see the prince. The girl liked the protagonist and was looking forward to that day's party. Kalyan was getting ready in his royal clothes for the nobles' conference. There was 1 hour left before it all started, and the protagonist had a favor to ask his butler. It was time to settle this. The tea that was being delivered to the weakest prince. The boy finally met the queen. From now on, everything would change. Outside, the butler was on horseback. He'd been given 2 envelopes, one to deliver to Ellen, and the other to the Mages Association. The first stop had to be the association, and the butler started to worry because his lord was going to the banquet alone. The boy said he was going to handle it this way, telling the butler to stay calm. But that was easier said than done. Something like this had happened before. Even while thinking something catastrophic could become real, the butler held on to optimism. Inside the Mages Association, a woman had already prepared everything. It was a huge amount of information, said Aurea, the president of that city's association. But since it hadn't been revealed until now, it seemed suspicious. Ellen believed it was the result of political power. More and more intrigued, Aurea wanted to know how the prince was going to use those materials. Right then, the butler arrived at the association, and when he found Ellen there, he realized his job had gotten easier. He finally delivered the letters the boy had written. Ellen was already preparing to travel, heading straight to where the banquet was happening. The butler said he couldn't enter without an invitation. That was when the mage said the protagonist was at risk of not surviving until the next day. In the letter, Kalyan said he was going to make a deal with the queen, using his own life. If anything went wrong, Ellen would need to fix it. Exactly 1 hour earlier, the negotiations had begun. Kalyan told the queen they needed to be honest. She agreed, but didn't believe anything would change. Faced with her overconfidence, Kalyan told her to mind her manners. Thinking he only wanted to argue, the queen stood up. Disappointed, she'd thought she'd be entertained for a few minutes. Before she left, Kalyan said he knew about the poison tea. He asked for it to stop being served, calling it disgusting. Shocked at being accused, the queen said she didn't know what he was talking about. Expecting that answer, the boy came prepared, so she wouldn't do it again in the future. He brought a small container. Inside was a poison that stops the heart for a few moments. It doesn't react to silver and can't be detected by magic. Since the boy has the power of a blessing, his heart wouldn't be affected by it, but even that has limits. The poison needed to spread through his body. The first question the protagonist raised was, who would they suspect first? The queen started smiling like she'd lost it. She said things wouldn't go the way the boy wanted, because this wasn't her first time. She even said she was the one who took the life of the protagonist's mother. That made the boy furious, and he asked what he should do with that tea. The queen suggested he drink it all. As he drank the cup, the boy said her words would be taken as a refusal. That made the woman smile, believing no one would suspect her, because not even the king could control her. Celise believed there was nothing she couldn't get in that kingdom. That's how she got the throne. All she had to do was remove the obstacles in her way. But there was still one thing she hadn't achieved yet, and she was working to make it happen. The protagonist started coughing hard after swallowing the poison until his body collapsed to the floor, badly weakened. The king and his brothers panicked over the boy. While they called for a healer, the queen smiled at the scene. Chaos broke out at the banquet. People thought someone had tried to poison the prince. Even if it was possible, nobody could say for sure. The nobles fell silent. Raising suspicions in that room could be deadly. Celise was impressed with her own power. No one dared say she was guilty of anything. The king rushed to the boy, desperate. Lifting him into his arms, he begged him to stay awake. The boy tried to speak, struggling. It made the king remember his late wife and the last vow she made that he would take care of the son they had. A memory Romain never forgot. Celise, despite all the commotion, announced she was returning to her own palace. Furious, the king asked if she was involved, shouting her name loud enough for everyone to hear. Everyone at the banquet went speechless. The queen couldn't believe it. Now the nobles truly started considering that something had happened. Hiding her face behind her fan, she said she didn't understand the accusations, and claimed the boy was always sick. That only made the king angrier, because it was exactly what she'd said when the queen died, when she gathered all the kingdom's knights. The same scene repeated years later. Sayas took advantage of the fact the protagonist had been a very sickly child. She used the chance to say someone else had been present at breakfast, the second prince. Hearing her accusations, the king ordered her to shut up, but she was shameless, and knew how to act. She said she was worried about his children. She said it like she were a mother figure to the boy, which offended the king even more. Then someone unexpected spoke up. Planche said his brother was fine and he'd never felt there was anything wrong with his health. He even remembered the protagonist used to tell them there was nothing wrong with him. Finally, the priest arrived to examine the boy. After being humiliated by her own son, Celise left the banquet. Using healing magic, the priest tried to do something, but something unexpected happened. A magical barrier made by the boy's teacher. It looked like he'd arrived at the crucial moment of the night. According to Ellen, that would kill the boy. The king grew even more terrified, because his son needed urgent treatment. Then they were told the boy had a magic circle in his heart. Combined with holy power, he would die with no viable options. The king became more and more desperate. Ellen said a healer with nature power could do it, but with magic alone, it would be impossible. Even the boy's teacher was having flashbacks. His own son had been struck by something similar. The scene was repeating for him too. His disciple was about to have his life cut short. The expression on his face was the same one his son had worn once. Ellen hadn't expected to need that spell a second time, one that makes the target feel no pain at all. Obtundant was the name of that witchcraft. Outside the city, pamphlets started falling from the sky. The truth about the Brizan family and the 37 people they killed. It sparked outrage. People now wanted revenge for what the queen did to the boy. The rumors set the population on fire. Ellen, now speaking with the king, said the Mage Corporation needed to be created. They had to use the situation where the queen was the guilty one, and coincidentally he'd already been thinking about creating the Mage Corporation. Celeste, waiting to speak with the boy, didn't know when they prepared something like that. To her surprise, the protagonist was fine, even after spending a week on the edge of death. Still, he was weak, but he pushed himself as hard as possible to show strength, not weakness. For some strange reason, they were negotiating again. The boy said her deadline was over. After a week, the situation was different, and in fact, the queen was more willing to listen and accept proposals now. Callian gave a mocking smile, saying Celeste had forgotten something important. Her permission was useless now. Furious, Celeste asked what he wanted. He asked for the Knights of Pabel. It was time to get rid of that military force. That scared the queen, because it was her biggest asset. To continue, Celeste would have to give up what was essentially her personal guard. Callian called for his butler, Siegfried Jr., who brought some documents, a contract guaranteeing the queen's word, and one of the clauses involved her death if she broke it. Done through magic, it would destroy the heart of whoever disobeyed. The second prince went back to taking care of his roses, and he found out the queen went to speak with Callian as soon as he woke up. Before Clean lost consciousness, his eyes met his brother's again, another time. Our boy had said the flowers would bloom, a sign that all of this had been planned. Now that he knows what actually bloomed, the second prince is thinking about cooperating. Even Planche can tell our boy has recovered. Things are changing fast. Celise doesn't want to make that magical oath, but to Callian, the only way to negotiate with a woman like her is with real consequences. He's just waiting for her to say the word. After thinking it over, furious, Celise grabbed a quill to sign the contract. The magic quickly started spreading through her body, showing the contract had been sealed. For our protagonist, this is the perfect situation before she leaves. Callian admits he never had a good relationship with his brothers, and that Planche didn't take that stance to help him. He underestimates what he doesn't understand, and if he'd said anything more provocative, the king's sword would have taken his head off without hesitation. After a long silent moment, Celise finally left. Ellen went straight to see his disciple, who had woken up. Especially after hearing the queen had been there, it didn't take him long to realize Callian was starving, happily eating several bananas. Our boy said he did his part, and he's glad about it. Ellen said they got lucky. The half-elf siblings showed up at exactly the right time. That girl uses nature power as healing. Callian really took a massive risk, and even he agrees because he didn't know Hina's potential. That left Callian speechless. Not even in his past life did he know, because the girl died young. That only makes Ellen angrier because that boy's plan was unbelievably reckless. Even so, Ellen handed Callian something he'd asked for, the elf siblings' documents. They needed an official last name, and Ellen chose Baron, the old name of our protagonist. It's a small detail that made our boy really happy. Making them citizens of that land makes everything so much better. But Ellen said the idea was actually Romaine's. Rumors that the king cares deeply about him are spreading more and more. Callian realized that's something someone else should have felt later. While he was thinking, our boy asked the butler for a few more bananas, but Siegfried Jr. had something important to say. He can't keep working as a butler anymore. Now there's a flashback about the butler. He's going to see his brother, who looks extremely weak, covered in bandages. They talk about the noise the birds made that morning. During the summer, the older brother, barely hanging on, asks Siegfried Jr. to play violin for him later. The butler overheard adults talking. His brother's condition was getting much worse. Back then, he didn't really understand what it meant to not be able to have something, or to be someone who would never get to have it. After a while, his brother asked him for the truth, asked if he was dying from that illness. Then a fire happened there. They had to evacuate in a rush. It was caused by the butler's older brother. That was his way of leaving a world full of pain. Winter came, and eventually summer returned, along with the birds singing, but nothing was the same anymore. Siegfried couldn't stand seeing his son isolated, so he forced him out of the room. That was when the butler saw a little boy in the square. The nation's third prince, our protagonist. That was the day the butler decided to become a butler. He told our boy everything, and even though he was someone close to him, he didn't know anything about what had happened to our protagonist. To make it worse, it was his hands that delivered that poison. Feeling horribly guilty about everything because of that, because he didn't know anything. Callian almost died, and he doesn't want that to ever happen again. Seeing the butler drifting off, Callian shouted to get his attention. First, he told him to say who he's looking at right now. It's the protagonist, and that's proof he isn't going to die. The butler has always been at his side, and this isn't the time for Callian to lose his banana peeler, because with his help he's managed to endure everything up to now. There's one thing our boy is sure of. He knows he can trust the butler with anything. Siegfried Jr., everything up to now, is crying now like a child, realizing he still won't be able to go home because he found someone he'll protect for the rest of his life. After pulling himself together, he promised he'll find everyone who persecuted our protagonist. Callian said if he's going to get revenge, he should stay quiet, because elephants make too much noise. The butler tried to take it back, saying he won't make that much of a scene, until he realized the word Callian used for him, elephant. That means Callian already knew everything. The butler wants to know since when he's known the truth, and our boy dodged the question. At least they went back to acting normal, leaving what was behind them. Our boy got pulled into a moment of intense introspection, where he saw himself, the former owner of this body, approaching him, walking his path toward who knows where. It felt like a thank you and a goodbye. Callian is falling, drifting farther and farther from that strange moment, until he finally wakes up in his own room. He held a mourning ceremony, lighting a candle for the old Callian, who is now gone for good. Our boy said the old Callian seemed like he was in a hurry. He gave him the life he has now, but wished that our protagonist could achieve what he wants. For the old Callian, life was a prison, which makes our boy envy the freedom he must be living now. But so much has happened already, and he can't abandon it halfway through. Our protagonist decided he'll live this second life to the fullest. The Knights of Pabel were dissolved and returned to Bryson territory, and the announcement about the Mage Corporation has just been made. After 3 months, our protagonist's servants concluded they'd need to call the tailor, because our boy has grown a lot. When he went to meet the king, Romain was impressed by how tall the young man was. They're making preparations for Rosalita, since it's Callian's birthday. Ellen said he has someone to introduce to his disciple, the mage who will handle his security during the ceremony. Arsene introduced himself and said he's honored to have that responsibility. His presence almost made Callian have a heart attack. Romain said he's an excellent mage from the corporation, because he's very talented. Our boy feels flattered, recognizing it was a big surprise, while also trying to hold back his anger. The Mage Corporation is almost ready to be established. Practically speaking, they still need a name, and there are still lots of adjustments to make. While the meeting is happening, Callian can't stop looking at Arsene. Ellen asked the king if he has a name suggestion, since he'd been thinking about something like this for a while, and he does. Valken. His answer came so fast that Ellen felt relieved. He asked before suggesting anything himself. Our boy wants to know what Arkan thinks. The mage looked a little confused by the question, and Callian clarified he meant the name Valken. What does he think? Still a bit cautious, Arkan said, it's a good name, and that's what got chosen. Later, using a silence spell, our boy told Ellen everything that happened in the past involving Arkan. Even though Arkan killed him, there's no need to change guards now. The situation changed, and people changed too. Even so, our boy still holds a deep grudge over what happened. The one who came to see our boy was Baron Melfear. It's been a while since the last time. Our boy apologized for stopping contact, but Melfear feels deeply honored to be in touch with the third prince, since he hasn't associated with any noble so far. But our boy got straight to the point. He came to collect the reward for saving the man's life. In every sense, the Baron was expecting something like that. He's been trading diamonds and even horses with the imperial family, but the prince seems eager to hear something else. Melfear said he still doesn't have anything to give him, and that made Callian smile. Our boy asked if the noble could run another kind of business, and Melfear said he has the people and resources for it. The problem is Bryson has that too. The Baron was confused because he thought he had Callian in his hands, but Callian said it very bluntly, and it was unexpected. Our boy smiled and said that's true. Callian said he's going to establish a mage unit. They have people and resources, but they need management. Melfear asked if that's the cost of his life. Our boy said yes, that's the price he wants. Full of loyalty, Melfear is ready to report for duty to someone who was supposed to die at 15. Callian not only changed everything, he's also surrounded by people he can trust. All that's left is to find Siphanian at the ceremony and ask why all of this is happening. During his birthday celebration, Callian realized everything is properly prepared. Even that jerk brother is there, and it's been a while since they last spoke. As Callian walks away, Planche calls him Blood Eyes. Our boy said he won't tolerate that anymore. His name is Callian. To his surprise, Planche said that isn't Callian, because he rides horses, uses swords, and even talks back. Planche wants to know who he really is. Callian also needs to remember he isn't Baron anymore, and that Planche isn't the crazy king he once knew. First, he has to wait a little longer until he learns from Siphanian what really happened. Looking at his brother, he said he has a lot of wild ideas. Ellen said Planchy might be an alcoholic, but he isn't stupid, so it makes sense he found it strange. With time, Kallian realized his brother's suspicion will grow. They need to deal with that. Ellen reminded him that now he's Kallian, and nobody else, and that's exactly what our protagonist decided. Still, it isn't easy to forget he was Baron once. The mage tossed something toward his student, and told him to catch it, a communication ring, so he can be advised when needed. It doesn't work where Sifanian's power is present, it's useless in the castle, but outside it works normally. Ellen also reminded him that everyone in that hall is his people. Commander Johann introduced himself. He leads Siegfried's men, and they'll protect Kallian all the way to Sifanian's nest, which is in their territory. They're genuinely impressive, and they don't seem to like the fact their young master works as a butler. Siegfried Jr. asked if our boy needed anything before the trip started, and in front of all those knights, Kallian asked the butler to bring him something to drink. To make it worse, the butler asked if he preferred tea. Once Kallian decided, the butler told him to wait a moment. Kallian obviously noticed those knights are really bothered by it. Ellen can't understand why his disciple seems to make enemies on purpose in the city. This ceremony seems very important. Something rare. The big caravan is ready to leave. Planche is still watching everything closely. The queen won't be coming with them, but she stays deep in thought. Our boy is going to travel with his master's approval. The Rosalita ceremony has just begun. Knowing what's happened recently, the king is worried about his son's safety. Ellen said there's no need to worry that much. Romain finds that confidence strange, and the great mage said he didn't say anything special, but that's exactly the attitude that makes the king even more worried. Kallian looks at the communication ring, and since there's no response, his master must be inside the palace. The butler keeps being extremely attentive, and that only fuels the knight's anger. Siegfried Jr. had already said something about it. Kallian can't use magic, and his sword skill isn't that good, so the knights need to be even more careful, because the young prince is basically a defenseless child. That only makes the knights even angrier. They're hoping young Master Siegfried will quit this lowly job soon. They still have to travel for 3 more hours. The butler suggested they stop to rest, but at that exact moment everyone went on alert. Kallian realized this isn't that kind of situation. From the middle of the forest a girl appeared, asking for help. She isn't an ordinary person, she's an elf. After being rescued, she said her name is Sia, and that she's hungry. She'd been hiding in the forest. Kallian started to feel that first contact with her was really strange. The commander asked what they should do. Kallian told them to feed the girl. He also said that if she was being chased, she should have said so earlier. A hooded man on horseback is approaching. Kallian pulled a hood over the girl and told them to hide her. When the stranger got closer, they asked who he was. The man said he was chasing a thief. The commander said there were no strangers with them, but the man quickly spotted the child being hidden. He told the knights he wasn't there to cause trouble and asked to take a look. So Kallian asked what the person he's looking for looks like. The wanderer said it's a young elf, and Kallian told him to search for that. The girl panicked, and the wanderer headed toward her. As he passed by Kallian ordered him not to turn around and to pay close attention. The 2 people hidden and watching weren't there to help. Their killing intent is aimed at the wanderer and the child. Once he confirms where she is, arrows will be fired. The wanderer looked back in desperation and arrows were already flying. But all of them were stopped in midair by our protagonist, because he even warned the wanderer not to look back. The possible ambush put all the knights into combat mode. Arxen put up a protective barrier around the protagonist. At least he's useful for that kind of thing, even if Kallian doesn't like him. The arrows stopped coming. The attackers must have run. Arxen said he'll take care of the child, and told Kiri to help our boy. Going over to our protagonist, Kiri saw something dangerous. That wanderer is about to cut the young prince's head off. Shocking everyone there, our boy blocked the attack pretty easily, and even used magic to counter, slamming the extra to the ground. The knights didn't imagine our boy wasn't useless. Looks like the prince can do more than they expected. The butler was obviously terrified and started scolding our boy. He could have been seriously hurt. He said our boy isn't that good with a sword and not that good with magic either. But the knights who saw everything strongly disagree. Someone useless wouldn't have been able to do that to the wanderer, and not that easily. After that, it was time to talk to the elf child. When asked what she stole, she said Luca did it. She didn't do anything. Kallian can't interrogate the child. She looks really shaken, so he called Arkan to help. It's on him to understand everything the elf is saying. After a brief interrogation, Arkan looked exhausted. Salas works in the Heriska forest, and she travels with Luca. It looks like he stole something from those men. The 2 of them got separated while they were escaping. On top of that, the girl answers before anyone even asks her anything. She doesn't know why it happens. It feels like some kind of clairvoyance, but she says it's not exactly that. Arsen has the tough job of keeping an eye on the child. Kallian is going to leave her at the next forest so they won't be slowed down, and it'll be up to the lord of that region to investigate what happened. At that moment, the commander came over to talk to our boy. There was something really suspicious mixed up in that wanderer's things, and he showed the artifact to Kallian, who was surprised too. Our boy knows exactly what it is. It's the poison he's been taking every day for a long time. Now he wants to interrogate that wanderer personally. Now that he's locked up, the wanderer said he thought our protagonist was just some young noble but realized he was wrong. Kallian answered that he's even more special than he'd imagined. Showing a small sample of the poison, our boy said he's not going to push for an answer. He wants the truth. He asked if the Wanderer knows what it is. The Wanderer said all of them had a bit of it. He thought it was something useful, so he stole some too. Our boy asked what those people were looking for. The Wanderer said he isn't sure because they were wearing masks. That left Callian deep in thought. It doesn't seem like the Wanderer is lying or trying to protect anyone. But if our boy figures out what the problem is, he might be able to help this man since he's the very precious son of an influential family. The Wanderer said his wife is in Hansen village, and those people know where she is. Callian promised he'd protect her no matter what. He also learned those men had dropped small marble stones about the size of a fingernail. He also heard they needed to be checked by a priest. Callian thought it might be a relic used by the priests of Tencel, and Tencel has been searching for sacred relics, so if they lost something valuable, they must be worried. Now the question is why they have that poison. It's used by Secretia's secret agents so they won't be exposed if they're captured. The Wanderer also said he heard what they called their leader Blue Nightingale. It sounds like a code name, and it surprised our protagonist like a bird name tied to his father, and it's somewhere nearby. A heavy rain started pouring down, and it stopped our protagonist from moving forward, so he had to stop in Latland territory, which he didn't like. The lord of that place was already drunk, happy about our protagonist staying there. Hale is sure it's a blessing from heaven that forced him to serve the third prince. Earlier, the butler asked if our boy remembers Count Hale. He'd sent our boy a gift before, one of the ones that got returned. He used to support Prince Randall, then switched his support to Planche. Our boy sees him as a social climber. Hale said he couldn't even sleep after hearing rumors our boy was in the area. Even the Count's butler looked embarrassed about it. Arson had to interrupt the meeting because he had something to tell our protagonist. Quietly, he said they'd caught the messenger bird. Our boy knew they'd try to contact the Blue Nightingale, but the rain messed everything up. Hale offered the mage a drink, but it got refused. Callian asked if there were any priests of Tencel there. Hale fumbled and dropped the wine bottle. He got furious and said those priests are arrogant and claim that land is ruined. He kept getting more worked up, and our boy realized there was no point trying to talk it out. Using the little magic he knows, he put that lord into a deep sleep. Our boy was furious. Hale's words really got under his skin. Through the ring, Callian told his master he'd gotten involved in the theft of that sacred relic, and now he's in danger. But using knowledge from his past life, our boy believes it's fine. Blue Nightingale has never failed a mission before, and she must already know he's the third prince. They need to investigate the place and look for priests to figure out what that spy is trying to do to them. A local bar seemed almost empty. Our protagonist went there saying the people outside had followed him. A woman told him not to worry, saying she's not cruel enough to hurt people for no reason. Callian admitted he was worried, thinking his caravan was attacked because they knew who he was, and of course they knew the boy's identity, but that wanderer didn't want to hear it. That's when our boy noticed there weren't many living people in that bar. Blue Nightingale said that man acted impulsively. Callian asked if she's involved in this now. At first the woman would have said yes, but looking at our boy, she felt the coldness of someone experienced, and thought about going for him with her knife, then decided it wouldn't be easy. Our boy wants to know if the elf she's chasing is still alive. They lost his trail in the forest. She doesn't like how things are going, and since none of them took much damage, she suggested our protagonist leave, promising to leave the child alone. To agree to that, Callian wants some questions answered. The first is why they're looking for a sacred relic, if she isn't a priestess. The woman started watching our boy with a hard, icy look. She said those objects are very valuable. Our boy suggested she planned to sell them, and she did say her main job doesn't pay that well. Our boy asked if the buyer of the relics lives in Latland. She said she doesn't have to sell relics that way. It would be much easier to find a buyer in Kairos. The woman said her buyer pays very well, and she already has a relationship with him. Our boy knows a Secretia spy can only build a relationship through one route, with people who sell information about Kairos. To pay for that information, she's getting relics. After thinking for a bit, our boy is going to ask the last question. We go back to the royal palace. Many requests were made to the king. He's our protagonist master, and he said he knows that person very well. There's no need for so many confirmations. He wanted to know how many priests of Tencel passed through those lands. The king thinks it might be a coincidence. Right now, there are 14 priests. Other priests went to that region with a single proposal. They're gathering them all. It's not like Kairos is forcing them to do anything, so he allowed them to search for them. Ellen said Tensel's situation isn't good. They need a lot of priests. That's why the king allowed them to leave the territory. He still doesn't understand what the great mage is getting at, but he learned his son wants the location of all of them, which made the king really curious. It doesn't make sense for his son to be so interested in that, because he's already in a region that has a priest. Meanwhile, Hale was drinking from a specific wine bottle. Now a similar bottle is in the mysterious woman's hands. Our boy noticed that small detail. Blue Nightingale came back to the last question. It seems she already answered it, saying it wasn't very modest. Outside, in a hurry, Callian realized his hosts had lied. The priest was being hidden there. Callian needs to return to the castle urgently. He told his master about it. When he put that man to sleep during their meeting, he's sure the man wasn't drunk. It was all an act. Where our boy is staying, someone tries to speak with him, but his butler won't allow it. Callian went out for his night walk. The old man who's the butler there said he needs to talk to our boy because his master wants to apologize. Siegfried Jr. said that's not the proper way to apologize, and it's not a butler's place to pry into the prince's life. That left the old man very embarrassed. Siegfried Jr. was trying to buy time because our boy still hadn't come back, and he couldn't let those people find out anything at all. He got more forceful with the old man, telling him to stop bothering them. Then our protagonist opened the bedroom door, complaining he can't rest with all that noise. His butler was relieved to see him. Callion called his own butler incompetent, saying his only job was to scare off nosy people. That made the boy apologize, because the old man refused to leave. With a rough motion, our boy slammed the bedroom door. But inside he felt relieved. His clothes were still wet, and he realized he just imitated his brother's jerk behavior perfectly. With things settled, his butler admitted he'd come back earlier than expected, using the windows to do it. Callion asked if anything else happened while he was gone, but it was only that old man. The problem is the Snoops and our boy climbing out the third-floor window. After getting scolded for that, he promised to be more careful. Callion noticed his butler was a bit irritated, and he heard a fair complaint. Our boy never listens to him. He said Callion went out for a walk, but the old man kept coming back again and again to talk to our boy, insistent and methodical, more interested in timing than in where our boy had gone. In contact with his master, he realized the lord of that region is already alert. He definitely wasn't drunk at that meeting. Now they're going to uncover something much bigger. His contract with Blue Nightingale could be exposed. Drinking from that wine bottle would have been the perfect excuse, but the lord was put to sleep with magic. That's why the butler was so anxious trying to figure out our boy's real intentions. Now it's about why he wants to get his hands on a sacred artifact. That could help in negotiations with Halidom, the land of Randall's mother, signaling the Baron wants them close, giving gifts to all possible heirs, helping that little child set all of this in motion. Discovering a traitor noble doesn't feel like a coincidence. Since it's raining hard, our boy is stuck in that building, and he decided to hunt the traitor. Hale is furious. He should have realized our boy would be trouble when his gift got returned. Because of that unexpected spell, his plans are in danger now. Blinded by anger, Hale wished our boy were dead. He's already spent a lot of money to gain political allies. He was promised fertile lands near the capital, but the scandal with Celis ruined everything. The old butler went to speak with him. He still hadn't managed to talk to the informant. Furious, the noble threw a cup at the old man's head, saying he can't do anything right. And thanks to the rain, the protagonist will be there one more day. The old butler asked if the negotiation should be postponed. Hale said there's no other option, they can't do anything while the prince is there. Still boiling with rage, he told his maid to bring his clothes. He's ready to teach our protagonist a lesson in humility, so he never forgets it. It was time for a meal and it was still raining hard outside. Hale believes the protagonist's calm look is just a bluff. He plans to use his title as count to punish our boy for using magic on him. Soon that young prince will be begging to be forgiven. While speaking with our boy, someone apologized for the night before. Callion said it's fine and went back to eating. Hale asked if a spell had been used. Our boy confirmed it, saying the lord's behavior was becoming unbearable. But it's fine, old grudges, he'll let it go. Since it must be the first time that noble has hosted someone from the royal family. It's normal he'd be nervous. Hale didn't expect that comeback. Realizing our boy is extremely sharp after that brief exchange, Hale is the one who looks like the fool. Callion said he was exhausted from investigating an ambush, and because of that he got a very interesting piece of information, the name of a kind of bird. Hale almost choked when he heard it, making the old steward very worried. Hale said not to interrupt because he and the prince are talking. Callion said he still needs more details, but it's in the lord's interest to know everything is happening on his land. Visibly worried, Hale said he'll help with the investigation. He doesn't want the prince getting hurt on his territory. The knight's commander decided to come over too. While they talked, Hale got even more irritated. And our boy said something very lucky happened for that count. It looks like their man finally decided to tell the truth. They all went to that same bar. Hale was disgusted. He would never have gone to the outskirts like that. Despite the noble's efforts, our boy had already won that battle. The wanderer asked what happened to his wife. Callion said they didn't do anything to his family because he gave his word. But there's a reason he came to see that man. He'll be punished with execution, since he tried to attack a prince, and there are witnesses. There's nothing to be done. Even if he were spared, he has serious wounds that would end his life soon anyway. But our protagonist can offer another path, a decent life with workable land and a modest house to live with his wife if he's willing to cooperate. Then his punishment will only be the amputation of his infected arm. After thinking for a bit, the wanderer agreed. He confirmed Blue Nightingale is a spy, and she's there to meet a client. They have a long-standing relationship. In Hale's presence, our boy said there's a double agent there. That kind of betrayal is extremely serious, words that left the poor count completely terrified. Callion is just waiting for him to do something and hand over more evidence. The old steward started begging for mercy, saying he was only following orders. Ellen didn't expect anything like this, and our boy took a closer look at the old man, concluding he's a priest of Tansel. Only they could buy divine artifacts. The count found out that secret. The old man is sure his head will be cut off when Halidom finds out he sold sacred relics. That confused our boy because it's not like they were buying the artifacts. More and more interested, he realized the old man is ready to tell everything. The buyer is Viscount Lannon, Queen Selice's brother. He's the one offering the artifacts to Haladam, so it looks like the political maneuvering still isn't over. If this happened, it means the Viscount has abandoned Planche and is siding with Randall, so he shouldn't be backing the Queen anymore. Now that they know that, the question is what the next move will be. This is the kind of news that's going to cause a huge uproar, so Ellen suggested they speak to the king first. Before that could happen, the young prince asked for a letter to be written, addressed to Count Hale. He told them to take care of the prisoner's arm. Since the wound is so severe, that arm is going to have to be amputated, and he told the prisoner to accept it. The commander is ready to follow every order. As for Kiri, she needs to find that man's wife and take her somewhere safe. The elf girl is excited too, and she came with Hina to help with the cleanup. She still talks too much, but the prince already understands what she's like. Without Arson there, this is going to be really difficult. The butler asked if the prince was going to do anything about that messenger bird, and found out he wasn't. It's time to return it to its original owner. He just watches while the girls seem entertained by the little bird. Callian said he'll buy one of those for Hina when they return to the palace, because that one needs to be returned soon. Since Hina shares a room with another maid, she said her friend might feel uncomfortable with the bird. Callian told her to open the cage at lunchtime and do it near the window, because he's expecting a visitor. That night, he reads a book with a lot of patience. His visitor arrived earlier than expected. Blue Nightingale said the letter was far too touching. It was a threat. Callian was going to expose everything at the shop in the capital. The woman wants to know why this is happening. The prince gathered evidence about the sale of relics. He wants even more, enough to keep one of her secrets. Even so, she took a long time to respond. But there was no other choice except to agree, admitting she hates tedious arrangements. She threw several dice toward him. Callian realized they were magic bullets. He had to use a magical barrier to protect himself, causing a huge explosion inside the room and alerting everyone to what had happened. Callian locked the bedroom door, stopping anyone from coming in. Turning back to the woman, he asked if she really came there to kill him. Since she didn't have any bullets left, she went for her blade to finish the job. He knows he won't be able to withstand many aura attacks with the plain sword he's carrying. He needs to end the fight quickly. After trading a few blows, he managed to disarm her, then realized she still had magic bullets, and one of them was coming straight at his chest. With a lot of skill, he used his sword to block it, but the blade ended up badly damaged. Now Callian is completely defenseless in front of a determined woman. Two mysterious spheres just fell to the floor. The spy already has one injured arm, learning the hard way that the prince is a swordmaster. She can't attack him now. Callian is furious, thinking about what he should do. Then he decided to call her by her real name, Isla. That left her stunned. Callian grabbed her firmly by the throat and he noticed something right away. It wasn't there. The poison that should have been hidden in her mouth, something all Cedric spies have. Now it's time for her to cooperate and share the evidence. Isla asked if she'll be released if she does that. Callian is getting more and more confused about her, not knowing if she's loyal to her own cause. Maybe she's changed over time. Isla said that if the prince doesn't want to get caught, he should let her go quickly, or she'll tell all the knights what happened there, assuming he wants to keep his identity hidden. In the past, Blue Nightingale wasn't a traitor. She used to fight with swords, and she was nothing like this version of herself. That makes the prince even angrier. Callian said that if she was willing to go that far because of this, she shouldn't have died in front of him. A deep silence fell between them. The prince let the spy go and said his secret isn't that impressive. All he asked from her was the evidence, promising she'd be released without interrogation, because he knows she'll have to answer to White Eagle for what happened. Hale is still furious about everything going on. He doesn't know what that letter means. He was told he'll need a representative, and someone told the queen what's happening. This is the letter written by the prince's master. Hale realized his scheme to sell sacred relics has just been exposed. The great mage really is sharp, and all of this was set in motion by the young prince. Because of everything happening, Hale started to feel like people were underestimating him, but he already has a backup plan and he stored a lot of treasure in his mansion. That should be enough for a quiet escape, and there's a special item worth more than all the others. With all those relics, he'll make a huge fortune. That's when Arksen thanked him for the information, because he'd been hidden the whole time. Hale nearly had a heart attack at being surprised like that because the mage was completely invisible. That was the evidence they needed. Arksen presented the relics that had been hidden, along with the information being leaked from that kingdom. That made the prince very happy. Most of that problem was already solved. The one who's still really anxious is the prince's butler. He said something is happening outside. Several knights went to that residence and they belong to Kaela. They should be guarding the king, not showing up there. Ellen didn't understand why the elite knights were sent to that position. It's a bit much. But the king didn't want to take any risks. He only trusts those knights because of everything that happened recently. The great mage said this will have a big impact, because the king is giving the prince special treatment. That could strain other relationships, since the king still hasn't favored any of his children. Remembering a disastrous past, the king knows what can happen. He said his other children will join him the next day. It's time to see how they behave when they're all together. The butler wants to know if the prince is leaving already. Kaelin said he still has duties to take care of. The criminals will be sent to the capital. It's a shame one of them isn't alive anymore. That wanderer was declared dead, But in reality, he received the prince's promise and will live a quiet life in the countryside. Very worried, the old man wants to know what will happen to him. The prince knows the old man carries a big share of the blame. The old man knows he's completely guilty, but he was used as a tool. He'll be shown mercy, but he has to swear loyalty to the prince, being promoted to the prince's butler, which is actually a very good outcome. Even so, the old man is still a little uneasy. Kalyan can finally return to his main task, finding Safanian. Hale will spend his life in prison. As for the blue-haired girl, she met her end at the guillotine. Renesita is covering the streets that day, a shrub specialized in absorbing moisture. The capital is covered by them, and they kept the white rocks from turning red with the blood of the condemned. Randall is testing the prince now because of his involvement with that nation interested in the artifacts. But to Planchet Cumpy, that's the wrong concern. In fact, he hasn't had anything alcoholic since the prince left those lands. Planchet asked if his brother misses the drunk version of him. Randall said that if he stopped being an alcoholic, he can move on to the next mission, learning to stay quiet. After dropping a fork on the floor, Planchet said he's already getting too quiet. Back to the prince. They reached a very dangerous stretch of the route. There was a landslide in their way. To keep going, it'll be better to change course. This trip is taking too long. Kalyan is so irritated that he decided he'll set up a teleportation portal when he gets back. The elf girl said she could take them to her village to help with that. She said Luca is in that village too, along with the elder. They could stay the night there and continue traveling the next day. News that made the prince really happy. After a short trip, they arrived at the village and were impressed. It's really well built. Kalyan never thought he'd end up seeing an elf village. The leader introduced himself, a gray-haired man who wanted to know who the king of the humans was. Kalyan said there's no one with that title among them, but introduced himself as the representative of the caravan. Zerib is the elder of that village, and he has a favor to ask of the humans. The prince wants to hear the details before giving an answer. Not long ago, 3 elves left the village to visit the humans, and they still haven't returned. Neither have the scouts sent to find them. He wanted to know if they'd found anyone because they know very little about human territory. Kalyan noticed elves tend to ask for a lot. Zer asked because he believed he was speaking to the human king. These people don't seem very bright, and the prince said he's only a prince. To the elder, that doesn't matter. But the prince is already tired of their simplicity, saying there's a big difference in meaning. Zer confirmed he isn't asking for free. He knows the caravan is heading to Siegfried. Traveling on human roads can be slow, but they know the forest well, which could cut travel time by up to 4 times, something that would take 2 months. That was enough to convince the prince to help them. Knowing that, the elder gave a sly smile. Investigating in the forest, they didn't find tracks of interpreters. They found some mercenaries, but they don't seem involved in crimes. They could be slave traders, but it doesn't look like it. Kalyan decided to investigate nearby towns. According to the commander, there seems to be a rivalry between the cities there. A healthy rivalry can be beneficial. Kalyan is thinking he might be able to get a new sword out of this. When he reached the first town, he was surprised to find they don't have swords. The prince looked visibly disappointed, but the seller said he looks too young to be a mercenary. Kalyan said it's not only mercenaries who need them. The seller said he's wasting his time. The entire weapon stock was already bought by the lord, who's hiring mercenaries. Kalyan said he'll go to the neighboring town to see if he can find what he wants, but the seller said it'll be useless, because the same thing is happening over there. Finally, the prince understood what the elf wanted. Those cities are ready to go to war, and the elf village sits right in the middle. The prince wrote a few letters to both lords. He'll buy time so the war doesn't happen, giving the elves time to return home. Now that he's done his part, Kalyan wants to continue his journey. The elder got worried and asked what he'll do about the war. Kalyan realized the old man already knew that detail, but chose to hide it anyway. Apparently, the elves who didn't return home decided to work with mercenaries. All the signs of war are obvious. They already knew, and they tried to use the prince to prevent it because he's royalty. The old elf was backed into a corner. Upset, Kalyan said he doesn't need the forest secret pass because their deal is cancelled. With no strategic advantage left, the elder asked the prince to wait a little longer. He can't just watch a war happen and do nothing. Kalyan said nobody can fight forever. If the village matters to them, they should work to protect it, without relying on childish tricks and lies. Now the elder has no options. Kalyan said the routes used by merchants were suspended. Only Biri Singh goes that far, and the prince knows exactly who that is. The cities about to go to war have very poor soil for farming. They depend heavily on merchants. Biri Singh suddenly cut business with one of them, causing a major price imbalance and pushing the conflict closer. Kalyan understood that trade carries responsibility, but it only hits the common people. It doesn't reach the nobility. Outside, someone started knocking on his door. It was the old elf coming to offer a sincere apology. Luca was the one who dragged the prince into this mess. The elder couldn't tell the truth because he didn't know how the prince would react. To make it worse, Luca is his son. Everyone who disappeared was connected to him. If the prince knew the truth, the elder thought he wouldn't help, and he begged the prince for forgiveness. Even if it's an excessive favor, this help could change everyone's lives. With no patience to listen to the whole apology, Kalyan told the elder to deliver those letters to the lords. He should also find out whether they need anything besides food, because Kalyan will meet them after he gets that information. The old elf could barely believe he was still being helped. Kalyan said he isn't doing it for him. Still, the elder said elves never forget their promises, and he swore he would never forget that kindness. Later, Kallian started thinking about Lanenbjergsen, who's still a thorn in his side. Using the ring to speak with his master, he said it was time to clean house. News reached Marquis Evenbjergsen. The carriage is ready to receive him, but the patriarch said he won't be leaving that day. He asked his butler to handle everything with the visitors, but the butler didn't know this was going to happen. There wasn't anything scheduled, and the Marquis is going to miss the council meeting anyway. On top of that, he preferred to receive visitors in the meeting room. Now the question is who this person is. It's the prince's master. He and the Marquis still hadn't met in person. Evan said he would have prepared better if he'd been warned ahead of time, but the mage assured him it would be quick. He said the man's second son caught the third prince's attention, and that made the Marquis uneasy. Sipping some tea, the Marquis said Lannan isn't brave enough to do something like that. Ellen realized this man looks down on his own children, so he brought something more reliable than the opinion he was clinging to. A letter. After reading it, he became furious and asked what the mage was trying to say. They both know he tried to get rid of that troublesome one. Enraged, the Marquis said he won't listen to this coming from a deceitful Homer. In response, Ellen said it's hard to have a conversation with someone whose throat's been cut. That only made the Marquis even angrier, because he'd been disrespected on his own territory. Ellen was stunned by that kind of nerve. This man had no idea how dangerous Ellen could be. So Ellen made him feel something primal, the fear of death. Ellen also said he's not like our protagonist, who hesitates when it comes to violence, because this mage wouldn't think twice about cutting off a few heads. After being intimidated, the Marquis had basically pissed himself a little. Eventually, he had to calm down. The truth is, Ellen was impressed by that man's endurance. He withstood the pressure of an 8th Circle mage. Ellen also said he's sure the Marquis can take care of his own son, but he's going to suggest a more efficient route. The Marquis can be pushed out of his own inner circle. Kallian told his teacher to say the following: they're going to buy the man's business. When the rumor about the prince being poisoned spreads, it'll hit that company's profits. The Lannan family is made up of knights. The trade guild was set up for the second son, because he has no talent with a sword. At the first sign of losses, they'll dump it. The Marquis asked why Ellen would cooperate that much. Our boy had already anticipated that question too. Kallian said he won't be the buyer, but they already have the right person in mind. They'll sell the company to the second biggest merchant in the region, Melfair. It's on the Marquis to start the negotiation. The Marquis' son took a serious hit because of Hale's arrest. He wants to run before anyone finds any connection between them. His luck is so awful he can't even keep his plants alive. While he was thinking about what to do, he was caught off guard by a mysterious shadow. A man started choking him. He ended up getting arrested, and rumors about selling sacred relics started spreading. In prison, he tries to use the weight of his family name, but he stays locked up anyway. Eventually, the Marquis's reputation was cleared, and Melfair's management turned out to be exceptional. In the elf village, the old pointy-eared guy said the mother tree prepared the path for our boy. Luca is going to guide them through that passage. Kallian thanked him for all of it, but said he'd rather have Sirius's help, the girl they met in the forest. Since she seems to know the place really well, they're ready to move on. That's when our protagonist noticed the child started speaking normally. It felt really weird, and on top of that, the kid was holding something kind of mysterious. Obviously, our protagonist got very interested in that strange little stone and asked if it was the divine artifact they stole. Luca started getting anxious and said he doesn't remember. Arson seemed to recognize something about that stone. It might be an artifact too, which immediately caught our protagonist's attention. The Knight's commander said the energy coming off that object is dangerous. And yeah, they can feel a sinister aura leaking out of that tiny stone. It's possible the previous owner died in a brutal, violent way, and that needs to be investigated. Kallian allowed the girl to keep using the stone to make communication between them easier, and the artifact that once belonged to Luca now belongs to our protagonist. The girl was really happy about that and said she'll give it back when they reach their destination. The one still worried is the commander. For God's sake, it looks like that child is a boy. Anyway, the commander is concerned because he seems to know the questions before they're even asked. That's something our protagonist already noticed. That kid can sense what's going to happen, and that stone seems to block it from happening. Maybe it's connected to the axis of time. Our protagonist's blonde brother is getting some information. He's still thinking a lot about what our boy said that the roses would bloom. Lannan was the enemy who fell this time. The blonde boy started using an artifact hidden in his hands. Through it, he made the withered flowers come back to life. Back in the forest, our protagonist seems to be meditating a lot, building up his inner energy. Ellen said that instead of increasing his magic, the boy strengthened the aura he has, which wasn't what Ellen wanted, and it's a habit from his past life, since he used to use a sword. The problem is that even when he tries to increase his magic, he ends up doing the opposite, knowing that his master said he can help him with it. Our boy needs to keep walking his own path. Continuing the journey, they reached the end of the forest. Kallian saw a huge city. It's the land of the elephants, the home of his butler's family. The elf boy remembered that now they have to say goodbye, and he's ready to return the artifact to our protagonist. But Kallian has something to ask the kid. Does he really need to go back to the village right now? It doesn't seem like they want him there that much. If the boy's condition was a problem, our protagonist is willing to help. Before accepting the offer, the boy admitted that sometimes he feels uncomfortable in his village. But he learned from his mother that this is who he is in his purest, simplest form. Unlike the others, he doesn't need to be fixed. Even if he speaks differently, that doesn't change the fact that he's an elf. Those words impressed our protagonist, and he realized he still has a lot of growing up to do. The two say goodbye. Callian genuinely wants to meet that little friend again. Arkanaufer used to be bothered by the kid, looks like he's going to miss him a lot. That city looks like a massive fortress. It's a relief to know the Siegfried family never wanted to take the Empire's throne. Before entering the city, Callian told his butler he can act more at ease. He doesn't want to irritate more knights there, and he asked his butler not to act so much like a servant. But the boy was offended and said he can handle the situation. Siegfried Jr. still has a strong sense of duty toward our boy, the one who held a blade in midair to save him. After they were given rooms, our boy took a nice bath. He thought he'd already reached Siegfried territory. He did, but they're still at the outermost gates. They still have 2 days of travel ahead. Callian looked at that mysterious stone again. He realized that even though he changed because of this second life, his mana is still the same. So he had the bright idea to use his aura to feed the mana he needs. Arson saw the intense glow of that energy and was amazed. Our boy just found a huge source of magic, reaching the 4th circle easily. They're finally getting close to the main castle, but that brings up another problem. Besides him, there are 6 other sword masters on the continent. Those with powerful auras can recognize who the weaker ones are. Siegfried Sr. is the second most powerful man on the continent, far beyond our boy. All he needs is one brief look. He was shocked to realize he's standing in front of another sword master. Siegfried had a lot of questions, wanting to know how that happened. He said our protagonist has grown a lot and become a man. He almost didn't recognize him. Clearly he must have gone through a lot of changes. Callian said it wasn't anything that noticeable, but Siegfried disagreed, saying our boy truly changed. Now he's going to take the young man inside. Watching all this, the butler is really happy. Siegfried said that Great Mage picked an excellent apprentice, someone who's not only a mage but also one of the 6 great sword masters of the continent. Of course, Siegfried would notice. He didn't train all those years for nothing. He admitted our boy still can't see Siegfried's aura, but Siegfried can see our protagonist's aura without any difficulty. He said again that this is great progress, and his master must be very pleased. Since it's already late, Siegfried can't stay to talk and had to say goodbye. But it's fine. Callian realized he arrived earlier than expected. His host knows he'll keep traveling and wished them safety. Our boy's master drinks a bit of wine, saying his disciple reached the land of the elephants safely. With him is the king, who looks very worried because future issues make him nervous. The great mage quickly realizes he's thinking about succession. Callian is the last of his sons who still has to do this rite of passage. Soon they'll all be eligible to take the throne. Randall is too mysterious, Planche is very strong but also stubborn, and our boy still needs to show what he can do. Ellen said the king should name the least favored son as heir, then the brothers would plot against him, and the problem would solve itself. One thing this mage is sure about, our protagonist is still in the race. One day the king will see what this boy is hiding, but until then, he shouldn't worry about future abstract things. Everything will happen the way it's supposed to. Callian is about to enter that mysterious cave. After walking for a few minutes, he felt completely lost. He doesn't even know how deep it is anymore. Then his face was lit up by an intense glow. Callian seemed to be taken somewhere else, a prairie full of flowers. He can't tell where he is until his eyes catch something terrifying. Like its magical force can't even be measured. A presence that makes anyone afraid. Callian bowed before it because he's sure it isn't just a single will. That is the great Sisfanian, the entity he came to meet. Villagers working in the village were shocked. A huge mysterious flash appeared in the middle of the mountains. It's our boy presenting himself to that entity. He was only supposed to meet the goddess's will, but she decided to appear in her original form, overwhelming, suffocating. The goddess quickly realized this child carries memories from another reality. He turned her blessing into a weapon and now she's wondering what drives him. Moving closer, she said he was summoned to that place. Back in the city, everyone is still worried about what that could be, because it's the young prince's rite of passage. The butler is worried too, because something like this has never happened before. Siegfried went up to his son and asked if he really cares that much about our protagonist. The boy asked if his father shouldn't be inspecting those lands. He did, but he finished quickly. And the surprises of the day weren't over. A little girl with very unusual hair introduced herself. Her name is Veronica, and she's the granddaughter of our boy's master. She came with her mother, Rachel. Our boy is still being examined by the goddess. With a simple touch, she accessed all his memories, including the axis of time. Now she understands what's going on. But when she tried to tell him certain things, her voice couldn't be heard. Sisfanian realized what's happening, and said that woman doesn't want this to happen. They're talking about Sorrenti, the queen of the gods. She fought the void during the Great War alongside the 8 great heroes. After the battle, she fell into a deep sleep, but she's still alive. Sisfanian said, our boy needs to ask the right question. So he brought up the axis of time and said he wants to understand why, in his past life, they wanted that object. But once again, he couldn't hear the goddess's words. Sisfanian said, our boy's impatience doesn't line up with Sorrenti's will. He wants to know about things that happened after his first death, and learning that too early would change the course of everything. Our boy realized that if Sorrenti is interfering, it's because it's necessary, a sign this is bigger than him. So he asked one last question. He wants to know if it was his brother who used the artifact to bring him back to life. Sisfanian said that man is a king before he's a brother, and he shouldn't be seen as a fool. Nobody would change the natural order of things just for the protagonist's life. Callian understood it wasn't Chase who manipulated time, and his heart filled with doubts. The goddess asked our boy to show what he has. Callian got confused, because he thinks he has nothing. Then he remembered that small artifact. The goddess examined it, and once again her words couldn't be heard. After examining our protagonist, she recommended he keep that artifact, promising he'll find out everything when the right time comes. He shouldn't be disappointed just because he didn't hear what he wanted in that meeting. He should return when he truly believes the time is right. A bunch of carrier pigeons flew through the city to spread the news about the great light that appeared during our protagonist's ceremony. Siegfried had never seen so many pigeons in his territory. He ended up getting scolded by his own daughter, saying he shouldn't be idle right now. Her name is Demiria, and she's already an influential leader. Siegfried said it's fine even if he does nothing. His daughter said people want the power they have and they need to be very careful about who's in their territory. Her concern made Siegfried happy, because she's very smart. She got that from her mother, thank God. Still, they're a family of protectors, not rulers. Even if she agrees, she feels different times are coming. The two of them watch our protagonist's silhouette through the window. Siegfried promised he'll find out which families are in the region so his daughter won't worry even more. The butler was happy to see all those pigeons. He made a point of mentioning it to his father, saying he even saw a hawk. The goddess's message telling our boy to come back when he's ready still won't leave his mind. His thoughts were interrupted by the butler, who brought some tea and said our boy hasn't moved away from the window this whole time. He asked if Callian found anything interesting in that territory. Callian said what's interesting can't be seen from there. The butler went to the window and saw Hina and her brother. They're playing with the Siegfried family dog whose name is Jan. Since that's the same name as the butler, he got furious, because his father had that brilliant idea, but they quickly realized Hina really loves animals. Maybe they can adopt a dog at the palace. They'll need to teach sign language so Hina can communicate with it. The butler is fluent in that way of communicating because of his sickly brother. Callian apologized for bringing up something so sensitive, but the butler said it's been a long time. And besides, now he has our boy. Still, if the protagonist decides to adopt a dog, it'll cause problems with his brothers. Callian is ready to go to Camion, and he knows that's the Crown Prince's city. It almost sounds like he wants to become the successor just to have a dog. That's when our boy said he's also the only heir who saw Kursfanian in her true form. In a room somewhere else, a woman is having her hair brushed. The letters that were sent have already reached their destination, which gets this woman really excited. Our boy had a bit of trouble talking to his master. He needed to find a place that wasn't under the goddess's power. But he did find one, the family cemetery, discovered by the butler himself, which let the communication happen without any issues. Ellen wants to know how the ceremony went for our boy, and she quickly finds out it all worked out, but she still wants the details. She's shocked to hear that Callian saw the goddess in her original form. He was supposed to be there for that moment. Truth is, our protagonist was blown away too. He was told to come back when he's ready. Now that Lennon has disappeared, they need to keep an eye on the queen who got a visit from Evan that same morning. But that noble definitely isn't going to say anything about what happened, since the negotiation between him and the mage is protected by a pact. It's a little risky, but Ellen is good at this kind of thing. And her apprentice is bold too, and he's already done it. Lennon is a problem from the past now, so Callian doesn't need to worry about anything else. He was one of the queen's agents, doing the dirty work for her. The mage found a letter that might interest our boy. Celeste tried to contact the count. She's desperate to reach her allies. The problem is Evan's eldest son, who's also one of the 6 great sword masters on the continent. While defending the borders, he got injured, and he plans to recover in the capital. A pretty obvious excuse because he's clearly coming to negotiate. Our boy is interested in meeting him. Later, Siegfried invited our boy to sit on a log and rest for a bit. They used the time to talk about the ceremony. Our boy didn't just hear the goddess's will. Siegfried is impressed that he saw her in person, and he's happy about it, knowing she's still alive. His family has protected that cave for 500 years. A dragon's nest that a lot of people claimed wasn't even real. Turns out they were wrong. Their determination to protect that place really paid off. Callian says he'll be back to speak with her again very soon, and having a teleportation portal there would be incredibly useful. Siegfried asks whether the king would approve something like that, since it could leave the capital wide open. Callian assures him access will be restricted, and if it ever becomes a danger, it can be destroyed. As long as the king approves, Siegfried has no objections. Our boy has one more favor to ask. Siegfried assumes it's about sparring, but that's not what he means. Using his aura, Callian creates a kind of crystal in one hand. Siegfried realizes it's a magic core made purely out of aura. Callian reshapes it into a sword. He definitely wants to test how strong that weapon is in real combat. Siegfried is ready to help with the test. It doesn't look like it, but the old man is the second strongest swordmaster on the continent, and also the second most experienced on the path of the sword. A terrifying opponent. His blade is heavy and it's fast too. Kallian gets pushed hard by his attacks. Even so, Siegfried is impressed by the young man's skill. Even if he isn't powerful, his agility is incredible. Manifesting that sword has to be burning through his mana, and Siegfried isn't holding back in this practice. Our protagonist's talent gets Siegfried even more fired up. He doesn't look like that weak kid from before at all. But they've just found the limit. Siegfried knows the kid isn't a real challenge yet. It's time to settle that training properly. The old man throws a powerful strike, and our protagonist repels it, finding an opening for a clean counterattack. The blade passes dangerously close to the old man's neck. Kallian realizes he's done something really stupid. Siegfried is now giving off a huge amount of power, ready to show the kid where he stands in the world. In the end, the aura sword gets destroyed. But what surprises Siegfried is that he actually hurt our boy a little. They don't even have time to talk about it. There are a bunch of people watching, really curious. On top of that, the old man's sword has cracked and there's a wound on his neck. The commander and Siegfried's knights weren't expecting anything like this. Later that same day, they hold a banquet. The old man shows he can play the violin really well, which leaves our protagonist impressed. Kallian is still uncomfortable about the wound he caused. The old man's only worry is how much he scared his son, who's even more worried about our protagonist's condition. Kallian thanks him for the training session, confirming it was an excellent opportunity because now he knows how much durability his energy sword has. After seeing Siegfried's power, he understands he still has a long road ahead. The old man listens closely, then jokes and asks how that cut on the kid's face is doing. He says he overdid it a bit, but he had to react to our protagonist's speed. The two of them keep trading compliments. Siegfried says those techniques are pretty common in Siegfried Knight's fencing. That comment seriously freaks our protagonist out. Siegfried says it would be hard to pick up that kind of habit training in this region. The Empire's technique relies heavily on footwork, but watching the protagonist move, he notices he rotates his shoulder blades a lot. Siegfried tells him to be more careful, because people like Burisen would spot the difference easily. Our boy asks if Siegfried doesn't want to know who he really is. The old man says he's on his own land, he has no interest in knowing who's wearing Kallian's skin. He only wants them to train again. Our boy thanks him for that. He asks whether Gray will be able to sense the aura he has now. The rumors say that guy's father wasn't happy with his ability, but even so, he should still be able to see the protagonist's power. So the kid needs to prepare for every possibility. Kallian understands he can't just sit still. After 10 days on that land, Ellen asks if our boy isn't interested in going back. Truth is, the protagonist wants to stay a little longer, and he asks whether Gray has already traveled to the capital. There's still no news, but our boy decides to wait. Kallian is a mage who's also a sword master, something the world doesn't know. If Gray manages to sense his aura, it'll bring a lot of unwanted attention. According to Arsene, there are ways to hide mana using spells, and he's ready to help our boy with that. They also start researching the teleportation circle. With Veronica and Rachel, the great mage's daughter-in-law is very talented. She dedicates herself entirely to teleportation research. Our boy has a lot of ideas to share with Rachel and Arsene. They start working right away, while our boy learns to hide his mana. The spell itself isn't the hard part. The hard part is keeping it running. Siegfried is the only one there who can tell whether our boy's aura is leaking, so he can't leave the castle until the training is done. A lot of training sessions and work sessions happen until our boy finally gets what he wanted. Nobody would imagine he can use a sword like a master. It's time to travel again. Siegfried says goodbye, saying he won't go easy next time they train. Our boy says he doesn't plan on staying an easy opponent. Now they need to return to the capital. The mysterious man gets news too. Surrounded by women, he already knows exactly what needs to be done. It's time for him to go back to the capital. This is Count Grey Burison. Ellen can't stop being surprised by our boy. He managed to gather a huge treasure, exploring land that wasn't even supposed to be fertile. The Baron really was a good choice, and what used to go to Burison now belongs to them. The protagonist is genuinely good at this. The maid asks if she can lock that door, and the mage allows it. Walking through the corridors, he runs into someone, the king's eldest son, an unexpected coincidence for the great mage. Even so, he stays polite in front of him, saying it's been a long time. Plunch is wondering if he's the one who changed our protagonist. Or maybe because he changed so suddenly, he went looking for guidance from someone. But no matter what he does, Plancha can't get an answer out of anyone. Ellen says she has a lot of questions too, because the prince stopped drinking, and he must be taking things that make him think too much. Plancha realizes there are more people who miss the drunk version of him. Still, the mage agrees that people change, getting past fears and challenges, and stopping themselves from falling back on reckless impulses. The way it happens isn't always what matters. Planche seems disappointed by that answer. As the mage walks away, Planche knows that comment about being reckless was aimed at his past actions. It's been 20 days since our boy left Siegfried's lands on his journey. They changed their route a bit because Veronica's horse looked tired. Rachel's acceleration magic was way too intense for them. The Viscount in that land seems reasonable, and the butler believes it was good they stopped there. While our boy is getting a bit of rest, a loud noise catches his attention. That's exactly what he needs. So he asks his butler to deliver a message. The message gets delivered. Our boy wants to be introduced to the guests who just arrived. That makes the Viscount a little uneasy. He's receiving people from Burison, and even though he's level-headed, he knows they don't like the third prince. He considers sending his guests away, but the butler continues the message. If Gray is among them, Callian would like to invite him for tea. The Viscount feels relieved, because what happens next isn't really on him anymore. Finally, it's time for the two of them to be introduced. Gray accepts the invitation for tea, and it's time for them to get to know each other better. As they exchange their first look, Gray says he's recovering from a shoulder injury, so he doesn't feel able to stand up and bow to our boy. Only a noble family can remain seated in the presence of royalty, and they belong to Siegfried. Gray thinks he's being understood, saying he's in a lot of pain. But our protagonist tells him to lower his head, since that's something he can do. Even the butler feels the air get heavy. He's afraid something might happen to our boy, believing he still has a weak body. Arkson catches a butler spying behind the door. Updating the others, he says they need to stay alert. An interesting visitor has arrived. Before he can say who it is, Hina approaches them with tears in her eyes. The butler tells her to calm down and explain what happened. It looks like something happened to Kiri and the knights outside. Arkson decides to go out there to find out what's going on, but the butler advises him not to make the first move. The mage keeps going, aware of the responsibility he carries. Growing more anxious, the butler realizes it's only a matter of time before something bigger happens. Gray is not happy at all about being ordered to lower his head. Colleen says that behavior is extremely disrespectful. The prince won't say it twice. Completely furious, Gray stands up, and again Colleen tells him to bow. But this time he says it with a bit of that sinister energy of his. According to the butler, the two of them have met before, a long time ago. For Colleen, that makes sense. It explains this man's arrogance, and he must be shocked by the change in behavior. Now it's a question of whether he'll take the bait and try to attack someone he can't beat. Colleen wants, with every molecule and atom in his body, for that noble to choose violence. Gray starts to realize the rumors about our boy might be true, but he's stubborn. Thank God the host of that meeting, scared out of his mind, tells Gray to be more respectful. After that scolding, things might have gotten worse, which makes our protagonist deeply regret it because that man is close to his own death, even if he thinks that won't happen. Holding back his fury, Gray bows politely. Colleen says he's feeling tired now, and they'll continue the meeting another time. That only makes Gray even angrier. But before leaving the room, Callian tells the host to take good care of the Count because he looks a bit unwell. Comments that completely crush Gray's ego. But attention quickly shifts outside. A huge fire has just broken out. That's Arson's magic. As an ice specialist, he would never use an explosion like that unless, of course, it was to warn our boy. The mage blew up a carriage using a fireball. Arson still doesn't know exactly what was going on, but he tells Kiri that our protagonist won't be happy about this. The other knights are furious. On one side, they say he destroyed the carriage of someone important. On the other, Arson says they provoked someone who serves a person even more important. They're employees of the third prince, and the Count Gray's madam's dogs should learn to respect them. The knights decide to take that argument head-on, but our protagonist arrives right then, just to confirm they're madam's dogs. In front of the prince, they get nervous. Our boy asks the mage if he'll need to compensate for the damage. Arson says it won't be necessary. He'll pay out of his own reserves. So that settles it. Colleen believes nothing serious happened. But then he starts to notice Hina is missing. She always stays close to her brother. Arkson says those men tried to grab the girl to have some fun. Colleen starts smiling like a total degenerate. Now he's burning with rage, ready to finish those knights off. When Gray gets outside, it's already too late. His knights have had their tongues cut out. Arkson says they no longer belong to the Knight Order because they did something unforgivable to one of the prince's attendants. Gray feels even more humiliated after all of that. Several commoners witnessed everything. Colleen says his mage will reimburse the destruction of the carriage when they reach the capital. But that was the last straw for the stupid noble. Colleen asks if his squire has nothing to say about it. Kiri stays completely silent because he's already seen plenty of humiliation caused by his sister who doesn't speak. Now the prince is worried about her well-being too, which is more than he ever could have dreamed of. Still full of anger, Colleen orders his squire to keep his posture. That night, Colleen manages to relax a bit more, drinking some tea. With him is the host of those lands who judged all that behavior reckless because the count is completely furious and he might even try to attack the prince on the road. That would be extremely dangerous since he's a sword master. But what that noble doesn't know is that our protagonist managed to measure his aura, and at best they're evenly matched. Our protagonist would fight him wearing nothing but swim trunks with a knife in his hand, and it still wouldn't be a problem. So he tells the host that a confrontation doesn't worry him. Words so honest that they surprise the host, because our boy truly believes it. The prince's composure impresses him. Even so, he still has something else to say. It's about Kiri. He's already done several laps around the training field. He asked if our boy was really going to let him do that all night. Callian said yes, because that guy needs to learn a lesson. They both have their own responsibilities, and our boy is trusting his safety to him. Kiri needs to be someone capable. The noble understood that it wasn't just punishment. That mage who got burned in the carriage wasn't punished. Kiri is being punished for a lack of trust, not for bad behavior. Colleen expects complete trust from everyone who works for him. That made the noble feel a bit jealous, because it's a privilege to serve a master like that. Colleen found out that Gray asked to borrow the Viscount's carriage, but they were all broken, so it couldn't be done. Way too convenient. And yeah, it really was just an excuse from the Viscount. He said his lands are very modest. He can't afford to lose a carriage, so he didn't lend one out. Our boy took the chance to make an invitation, handing him a letter. He said that Noble could request an audience whenever he wanted. Kalyan also said he'd like company on the way to the capital. Accepting the letter, the Viscount promised he'd be ready to leave together with our boy. In the capital, Planche is talking with his mother for the first time in 5 months, and the first thing she brings up is our boy. Planche asked why she misses the protagonist, and Celise said Gray would be arriving soon. And it looks like Planche can't picture the path the queen has laid out for him, which made the prince ask what she meant. Celise said he's acting like a child. Being loud doesn't change the fact that he's wrong. When Gray arrives, Planche needs to do everything he can to keep quiet. Watching the queen closely, he said some people become unrecognizable, while others are incapable of changing. Celise in a sly way told the boy not to try too hard. Planche said he could give her the same advice, but to avoid trouble he'll do nothing, just like she wants. In contact with his master, Kalyan said they'd arrive soon. He was told the king wants to speed up the formation of the Mage's Corps. After the coming-of-age rite, Kalyan gained a lot of notoriety, and with Gray being humiliated, they need to be careful. Pavel's knights will be restrained. Ellen realized that's basically a declaration of war against the Barasin, but the king is doing it to protect his son. The problem is that the king is now at risk. The Mage's Corps will be presented when the prince arrives, and a ceremony will happen a week later. Kalyan is very worried. Even with his master's protection, the king will be in danger, especially with Gray in the capital. Our boy's butler said there's another route to reach their destination. Knowing that, Kalyan is willing to take new risks, because he needs to get to the Empire's capital first. Meanwhile, Gray is traveling inside a carriage made for women, which only makes him even more furious. He was told their caravan is being followed. It's our protagonist closing in fast. Gray doesn't know how the prince got there so quickly. It must be some magic trick. Kalyan said that idiot still doesn't know how to treat nobility, which pushed that man's rage to the edge. He's tired of being scolded by our protagonist. It's time to scrub that place's floor with our boy's blood. A huge explosion happened, and to Gray's surprise, he's being grabbed by the throat. Kalyan is slowly choking that bastard. Summoning his energy sword, Kalyan said there's only one person to blame for all of this, because honor demands he defend his own reputation. In front of everyone, he punished the noble for disobedience. For God's sake, they didn't even show what the guy's wound was, but he's on the ground begging for mercy. Kalyan asked if he still hadn't wondered why his brother had disappeared. A large amount of money was handed to Marquis Barrison, and after that Lannon, the troublemaker, vanished. Maybe the same thing is about to happen now to the eldest son. Kalyan made it clear he doesn't have much patience, so he'll ask only once. Who attacked the boy that day? Completely obedient, Gray said it was Marquis Evan, his own father. That made our protagonist sad, seeing how cruel that father is to his children. Looking at that noble's servants, Kalyan said they should back up that version of events too. Still terrified, they also said they aren't going to the capital. What happened there was just a small family disagreement. Our protagonist is being watched. Kiri is hidden in the forest. This was done for him too. As for the boy's past actions, it's all been forgotten. Kalyan said his subordinate used to know him better. Finding that strange, Kiri asked when that happened. Our boy decided to tell the truth, but they've got plenty of time. When he arrived in the capital, the protagonist's presence was celebrated, because the dragon had revealed itself to him. People are saying he'll inherit the throne. Finally, our boy managed to meet the rest of the family. He greeted his brothers very politely, and the two returned it with a certain indifference, especially Planche, who still seemed very intrigued as he returned the greeting. Kalyan couldn't even believe it was happening. This was completely unexpected. It has to be some kind of sneaky plan. During the meal, the king started talking with his sons. He heard Randall is still reading a lot. For our protagonist, that family gathering is the weirdest thing he's ever done in his life. The king, who used to be totally indifferent, now seems very friendly. One of the servants had to interrupt the meal, bringing urgent news to the king. He asked for that woman to come in. Watching Planche's reaction, our protagonist already knows who it is. The queen came to meet with them too. After being greeted by our boy, the queen walked past him, indifferent. She asked if the trip was smooth, and Kalyan said it was even safer than expected. Celise said she was worried. She was afraid he'd come back sick. Kalyan replied that the last time he got sick, he ended up even stronger. There are hardly any problems beyond the castle walls. Knowing what happened during his coming-of-age rite, Celise got a little uneasy. His reputation reached even the Empire's capital, so she went straight to the point. She asked if the king intends to make our protagonist the heir to the throne, a question that caught everyone there off guard. Kalyan realized this was a desperate move from the queen. The king said he had a conversation in the presence of the great mage, and the suggestion was to name his least favored son as heir. That would solve the problem of the most troublesome one. But there isn't a single child of the king's that he doesn't care about. And because of everything the queen has done, the king is thinking about making his decision. Selma slammed her hands on the table in fury, saying the king would regret it because he's ruining everything she built. She stormed out, and the king apologized to Planche for what he had to hear, because those words weren't meant for him. Knowing what happened with his own brother, the king said he doesn't want that future for any of his sons. They can't make the same mistakes that family made. After turning 20, princes who aren't heirs must leave the palace. They can only visit the capital for 5 days, and they also can't have private armies. Now we're introduced to the protagonist's uncle, Asnan, the author of a rebellion when the king took the throne, which ended up failing. He's now confined in a tower in the valley of Varakan. Our boy knows his father wants everyone to live well. His butler started asking if that would be possible, but even our protagonist doesn't have an answer, until he saw a mysterious rose along the way. But the flower isn't the only bizarre thing that happened there, because it's glowing in the dark. The butler pointed to the protagonist's pocket, which was glowing too. It's that mysterious artifact. Even though all the roses had disappeared, that one was the only one left. Calthian decided to interact with the flower. When he touched its petals, they dried out, and the flower vanished completely. The artifact's strange glow disappeared too. Calthian started connecting things, time, and that artifact. He heard from Sisfanian that he's very impatient now, but it's hard for him to shake these thoughts because his desire for answers is huge. 2 days passed, and the butler said our boy had missed breakfast both days. Calthian said he still feels very tired, thinking about a lot of things. Our boy tried to sleep, but he realized he'd gotten an unexpected visitor. The person at the window noticed our boy's magical power is real. A gentle breeze is enough to wake him. Getting out of bed, Calthian said it's already too late for visitors. It was Planche who had come. Planche said a rose is missing from the garden, and that must have been caused by our protagonist. For privacy, Calthian put up a barrier to completely block the sound of their conversation. He said his brother must care a lot about that rose to come all the way there. Planche said it wasn't an ordinary flower. Now Callian is thinking maybe that's why our boy missed breakfast, and he became sure his brother knows something. Randall is also a Transilian, and that rose is tied to the divine power in his blood. But when Planche asked Randall why the flower doesn't disappear, Planche got no answer at all. Callian started wondering if his brother is actually foolish, expecting a clear answer for no reason. Planche knows only divine power could make that rose last so long, but he doesn't understand why. Randall decided to hide it. That surprised the protagonist when he found out Randall can use divine power. Since something had happened, Planche decided to take responsibility, saying he had burned the rose, letting our protagonist play dumb. But before he could leave the room, Callian stopped him, wanting to know what he was doing. Planche believes our boy is skipping breakfast to hide the fact that he's bothered by this. But Callian's real question is why his brother decided to help him. They aren't close enough for that. Those words made Planche realize his brother still remembers. So he said that even if Randall has some kind of power, they won't win. Callian is now deeply shaken by those words. It seems our boy is being helped because Randall doesn't stand a chance against the queen. Finally, our protagonist realized the obvious. His older brother never wanted to become the next king. Their conversation left our boy deeply thoughtful, thinking about that flower and the mysterious artifact he got. Callian wants to understand how it's all connected. To reach his real goal, he needs to strip even more power away from the queen. Time is running out. When she learned what happened to Gray, Celise was completely furious. Because he was badly injured, he didn't even make it into the capital. The news that reached her was that Marquis Evan was responsible for the attacks. Celise can't understand why a father would do that to his own son. It seems it was an internal family dispute. Gray wanted his father's position, and the truth is it was a secret deal between him and the queen. With Gray's help, Celise would help him too. She believes her plans haven't been discovered. The problem is that her brother is a sword master. He shouldn't have been injured so easily. So Celise decided to send him some medicine, and she's determined to find out everything that happened in that incident. The queen's fury keeps growing. Whatever happened, it was a strategic move by a master, and Celise still isn't willing to give up. The queen ended up meeting with a knight and gave him a bag full of coins. He thought it was a very generous gesture. Tammy is the deputy commander of Pavel's knights. Nobody can see his true nature, and the queen knows he's a cold assassin. Now it's a matter of what his next job will be. Celise wants to find out what happened to Gray, and whether it was one of our protagonist's guards. Once the person responsible is found, he needs to be silenced forever. If that happens, Tame will get another bag of money. All he needs is the guard's name. The queen said it was Arkson, but deep down she's sure it was the protagonist. Rumors about what happened to Gray spread all over the capital. And that day the king summoned all the nobles to court, because he had an important announcement. He said they had ignored magic until now, but it was time to change course by creating a mage's corps. The nobles were shocked, because it puts the power of the knight families at risk. Valken is the name of this division, and in a week it will be inaugurated. They'll use the old facilities of Pavel's knights. After that announcement, the king asked to be left alone for a bit, but he ended up running into our protagonist, who knows this will upset the nobles. Callian wants to know if his father will be okay, but the king assured him it's not his son's place to worry about that. Our boy took advantage of being alone to bring up another subject. He wants to speak with the knight families. The king found that strange, but soon realized his son wants to build allies. Risky but brave. It impressed the king enough that he told his son to do what he wanted. This is also being done so he won't be the focus of the Beerison family. Callian also suggested they go on the hunting trip soon together with his older brother. When he heard the news, the butler was very happy because our protagonist is building his own political faction. Their conversation was interrupted by Arkson's arrival. Visibly exhausted, but it looks like he found a solution to the teleportation problem. It's the same logic as a magic seal, an impact between the traveler and the portal. Callian wants the details, but he'll hear them soon, because he told the mage to rest a bit. Arkson said he needs to talk to Ellen right away about the discovery, but the protagonist insisted he rest. Since he was so tired, Arkson didn't have the strength to argue. Callian quietly told Arkson not to fall asleep on the way back, but inside the carriage, the mage is already completely out. He remembered the protagonist's words and jolted awake at the exact moment. His caravan was being ambushed. Several men were closing in. Arkson told the driver to speed up and not look back. A weapon was thrown at the mage, but he managed to defend himself. Somehow, Arkson had already been expecting something like this, and as a member of the newly created Valken, he's fully ready to have a little fun. Callian is in the middle of a banquet with his master, who noticed Arkson's absence. Our boy said he must be busy with his own responsibilities, because what happened to Gray became public, and the queen is going to make a move. She can't be happy now because she lost a major ally. Only with Evan's death can his son inherit the title. The way things are, Celise can't say for sure whether her father interfered in what happened. She'll need time to get her thoughts in order. He also has absolutely no idea what Archie is capable of, and our main guy is sure Archie can handle a few nights on his own. The last face our boy saw in his past life was Archian's, and for all intents and purposes that ended up turning into admiration. Right now, extras are getting killed off in a brutal way. The assassin is already completely terrified because that mage is insanely powerful, able to cast spells in no time. Their only chance is to close the distance, so he hypes his men up with the reward they're supposed to get, but their attacks get totally shut down by a magical barrier, which only speeds up the deaths of a few more of them. They quickly realize they never should have taken that contract. Sending a group of 10 men against an opponent like this is just ridiculous. Arkson notices the men are trying to run, so he blocks the path of the only one still alive, the one responsible for the ambush. The corrupt knight drops to his knees and starts begging for mercy, saying he can tell the prince everything he knows. Arkson says he better be more specific if he wants to keep living, so the knight admits it was orchestrated by the queen. One of her servants works for our boy, and she'll be executed if anything happens. Looking at that bag of money, Arkson says his master isn't all that interested in remembering certain things. Completely desperate, the knight says he knows where the Marquise's money comes from, a secret, illegal casino. They make money off rigged bet-on fights, but our main guy already knows that place, and he's got someone with well-known expertise about it. Looks like the knight has nothing else to offer. He ends up saying the Marquise hasn't held a sword in years, and the one he used to use is completely ruined. Arkson says that detail might make the young prince curious. The knight also says the conflict between Evan and his son is real, but the mage is sick of it and decides to cut the extra's head off, because that mouth has already said everything that needed to be said. Arkson needs to figure out a way back to the palace, since the carriage kept going, and he doesn't want to waste his whole week on the trip. Then he starts hearing the sound of horses galloping. Before long, our boy gets his hands on that bag of money, and that sets off a massive chain reaction. Now Marquise Evan is being accused of trying to attack arson on the road. The imperial family's knights are already outside, waiting for him. Evan is getting furious. He thinks he knows why this is happening. It's because of the king and his mages. He asks where Tail, his knight, is, and gets told Tail was found at the crime scene. On top of that, he was summoned by the queen herself. Evan is determined to go to the palace. The butler asks if he wants to notify the queen about the visit. Still raging, Evan says if he does that, he'll punish his daughter, because she's not who he wants to talk to. He wants to talk to our main guy. At lunch with his family, they're told that a master from Valken has gone missing. Randall is the one who says it, and he thinks our main guy must be really worried. With a wide smile, Callian says the king and Ellen should be more worried about it. Planche stays completely indifferent, and the date for the hunt gets set. Looking at Randall, Planche asks if he's joining too. But that prince isn't planning to, because he thinks the king set it up with the eldest son in mind. Planche tries to convince him to get some fresh air, but gets ignored. To make it worse, he doesn't seem like the type who even likes hunting. Callian doesn't know if his older brother is doing all this just to help him. And right then, gathered with his brothers, he feels something strange. It's his own master, and something has Ellen deeply irritated. Not long ago, Ellen went to meet Marquise Evan. Ellen asks if he's feeling any grief over losing so many subordinates, especially when he still has to show his face at court. To Evan, that sounds like a provocation. He says the mage's presence there is only tolerated because of the king's favor. Ellen answers that at least someone in that conversation is enjoying royal favor. Furious, Evan says he already knows who's been influencing the young prince in a bad way. Closing in on that point, Ellen says the king and the prince are more trustworthy than a knightly house that had 10 men beaten by a mage. Ellen leans in and whispers in Evan's ear asking how much the bribe was this time, saying Evan must have made a lot more now than when he sold his own son. That genuinely sets Evan off, and he releases his full aura. Ellen isn't intimidated by it. He releases an even greater power than the nobles, and now he's going to show him that some things have been forgotten. It's time to remember where he belongs. The flames of that energy look like they're devouring Evan. Ellen tells him to think before he acts because he doesn't know who he's talking to. That brief exchange leaves the noble choking for air. Threateningly, Evan says Ellen may be powerful, but he's alone and he won't survive long. But the mage assures him he isn't alone in this fight. He asks if the Marquis knows why Gray got kicked out and sent away. Maybe Gray got an irresistible offer, since he's a corrupt noble too. Evan starts thinking about what his daughter might have done. That would explain a lot of the problems he's dealing with right now. Kalyan watches the two of them talking from a palace balcony. From the looks of it, Evan really is going to meet our main guy, and he's furious. What Evan actually wanted to find out was what Planche's relationship with the queen is like, but things changed too fast. He won't be able to see his grandson now until he figures out which side the boy is really on. As soon as Evan decides to leave, it starts raining. Kalyan realizes the hunt might not happen because of the weather. He asks his brother Planche what he thought of all of it. Planche says he heard about a message that morning, ordering some knights around. Kalyan figures Planche must have felt a clash between the two men as that morning, a sign the king is right. The boy has good swordsmanship. Wanting to know more, Kalyan asks if his brother talks to Evan often. Planche says he's never met him alone, which is exactly what our main guy expected, because that family is full of schemes. Maybe that's why Evan wants to visit him. He definitely wants to strip the queen of her noble title, hoping his grandson can get the crown's title. If Evan's goal is just to push the queen off the board, then he doesn't need to keep helping our main guy. But if he wants to become the next king, he should meet Evan immediately. Looking seriously at our main guy, Planche says he already gave a very clear answer. Now they need to talk about something urgent, the queen's situation. She might make some really stupid decisions. But our main guy is already ready for that, and he doesn't want to shield her from the consequences of those actions. If Planche is going to become a real ally, he needs to be ready for what's coming. Planche takes our main guy's hand and agrees, because he doesn't want to be used like the queen's puppet anymore. News of their alliance reaches the butler, and he's shocked. That means the eldest son turned his back on the queen, and in theory he had no reason to. Kalyan says his brother didn't turn his back on anyone, he just closed his heart to the mother he ended up with. The queen never even realized how toxic she's been to him, which is why the guy's an alcoholic. And here's the twist. He wasn't even an alcoholic. He just stained himself with wine. His breath was always fresh. It was all to ruin his own image. Every time he looked down on our main guy, it was in front of an audience. He did it hoping the queen would abandon him, but it never worked. And desperate for power, Salis has reached a point of no return. Only death will stop her. Even hearing all that, the butler still doesn't understand why this unexpected alliance happened. Our main guy doesn't have an answer for everything either. The only person who could truly understand Planche already crossed the bridge, the old Kalyan. Arsene isn't in those lands. Nobody's been able to find him. A messenger approaches the king to whisper something. They found a prisoner in the dungeons, Lanan Buriasin. Hearing that, the king is intrigued. Talking with Ellen, he asks if Ellen has forgotten who he really is. Even if he's a laid-back person, he holds the highest title within Vulcan. The king wants to show the court the power he has now, so he mobilizes the royal guard to increase the search efforts. Right now, Evan is facing serious accusations because of all this. The same knight who went to talk to the king was the one responsible for bringing that noble in. There are only a few days left until the inauguration of the new mage division. That's going to shock the nobles, with a title being granted to Ellen. Ellen has already realized the king knows exactly how much the nobles despise him, Evan in particular. The truth is, Ellen was originally a viscount in Liberin, but he became known as a great mage. In Sakritia, he also holds the title of baron. But out of all his titles, he prefers being the young prince's master. And from now on, he won't be just that. He'll also be known as Count Ellen, a title granted by the king himself. Ellen is immediately surprised and the king notices it. It's a pretty unexpected situation, and it could lead to major consequences. Our main guy realizes the rain has stopped. The hunt is going to happen. The butler goes to wake our boy up and is surprised to see he's already up. Kalyan took a short walk because he needed to take care of a few things. The butler says our boy needs to look at something else. They just received some horses as a gift from Baron Polan. Our boy is impressed by their quality. And that's not all. They also received a cat as a gift, which leaves our boy a little confused. He didn't know if he wanted to adopt a dog or a bird, but getting a cat is definitely a good thing. The animal ends up being handed directly to Hina. A pet like that can stay at the prince's residence, and our boy asks her to be very careful. Hina realizes our main guy remembered her request, and she's really happy about it. It doesn't take long for her to show what happened to her brother. The butler also tells our boy about the king's movements. He sent troops to the Burzan lands. Arkson is still missing, but that doesn't worry our boy at all. He just repeats Ellen's words. His subordinate strength isn't small. Even so, our main guy won't just sit around. A Vulcan mage going missing is serious, and it'll be treated that way. Either way, life keeps moving, and it's time for the hunt. Not everyone knows whether Prince Planche will join in too. There are rumors he isn't in good health. Watching through the window, Planche remembers a conversation. Our main guy told him not to join the hunt, and to say he's feeling feverish. Planche doesn't understand the reason for that plan, especially since he might genuinely not feel well enough to hunt. Kalyan says he'll talk to the king about it so he understands his son's absence. Planche still can't figure out what our main guy wants, but if it keeps him out of the succession conflict, that's fine. While he's thinking about it, he hears a cat meowing, the one that belongs to our main guy, playing with Hina in the garden. Planche knows the girl is our main guy's servant, and the path she's on leads to the rose garden. If he remembers right, around the same time Randall usually goes to the garden too. One of Planche's guards points a sword at the girl, Rudely, he starts interrogating her right away, asking who she is and how she got there. Hina is terrified and knows she needs to identify herself, but since the guard probably doesn't know sign language, she thinks about writing on the ground. As soon as she starts moving, the guard gets even more aggressive, because he doesn't know what she was trying to do. Hina panics because she has no way to write anywhere. That's when someone steps in, saying the guard's performance is pathetic. He didn't recognize a servant of the prince. His eyesight must be bad, or maybe it's his intelligence. Planche shows up and saves the day. Embarrassed, the guard apologizes, saying he didn't know she was a servant. Planche briefly meets Hina's eyes and tells her to get the cat out of there. She bows respectfully, thanking him for what he did. Randall says he'd been invited to the hunt by Planche himself, and yet neither of them showed up. Planche didn't expect to run into his brother in the garden, so he starts to excuse himself. Before leaving, Randall comments that things are getting better between Planche and our main guy. Out in the forest, the king isn't sure that's the best thing for his sons. While he tries to teach the mage how to use a bow, Ellen asks for silence so he can focus. Several nobles are with them, and they don't know why they were split into groups. Among them are some tied to House Burizen. Finally, after a lot of concentration, the mage manages to fire his arrow, but it can't even fly more than a few meters. The king has to hold back his laughter. Ellen hears it anyway and, trying to justify himself, says he's a mage who focused his excellence on other areas of life. The nobles realize the rival hunting group isn't going to be very impressive, and at that exact moment, the bird Ellen tried to hunt gets taken down. They can't even see the arrow. Ellen says there's no rule against using magic. He asks the king if that's true, and the king immediately confirms it. Then the king asks if his mage wants to hunt those people too. The nobles realize they're completely defenseless. This was just a warning. To that mage and the king, they're no different from that bird. It's time for them to think about what they're going to do with their lives. Kalyan says he'll soon be hunting a different kind of creature, and that's why he needs those men's help. When they meet again, it'll be at the palace. The queen has just read a letter that leaves her furious. It's Grey's reply. The news is devastating. He can't use aura anymore, and the queen is asked not to bother him right now. On her table is the same bag of money given to that corrupt knight. The bag was found at Arkson's last known location. Our main guy is the one who returned it to her. The queen tries to pretend she doesn't know anything, but our boy knows she met with the corrupt knight. Even so, Celise insists on the lie. Just because a mage disappeared, she says, our main guy is panicking. She asks if Kalyan has already been negotiating with Grey. Our boy tells her she's completely delusional, and he doesn't need people like her or her family. Celise scolds him, saying he needs to be more polite. Our boy promises that soon she'll pay for what she did. The queen's end is getting close, and Kalyan guarantees he'll be the one responsible for it. Remembering that conversation only makes Celise even angrier, and she throws that bag of coins onto the floor. Completely consumed by rage, Celise realizes she has nothing left to lose. It's time to settle everything. At night, someone tried to sneak into Planche's room. The boy woke up right away and realized that Mage had slipped past the defenses with ease. It was our protagonist who did it. He'd promised he wouldn't come in again unless he was invited. Planche wanted to know what his brother was up to, and the boy said he had 3 things to talk about. First, did Randall know they were working together? The answer was yes. Kalyan didn't expect the news to spread that fast and asked for more details. In the conversation they'd had in the garden, Planche had asked if it bothered his blonde brother, and he'd said it didn't, confirming to our protagonist that things were calm. Even knowing Randall wouldn't make things difficult, Kalyan still wanted to be more careful. Moving on to the next point, he ended up thanking Planche. The prince said he didn't even care about that. Someone had probably told him what happened in the garden with the girl and the cat. Thinking back on it, he knew exactly why he didn't need any thanks. Hina had already done something like that, and she'd done it very politely. Now that Kalyan knew that, he could get to the last point. Since the next day would be Valken's inauguration, he wanted his brother to stay sick for one more day. Planche said Kalyan was pushing it. Kalyan agreed, but asked his brother not to interfere in any way with what was about to happen. Getting ready for the inauguration, the queen was being attended to. Her maids were wondering if her mood had improved. She'd been extremely stressed lately, and that had everyone worried. Maybe that woman should have listened to her father and married some noble out in the countryside. Without meaning to, one maid pulled the queen's hair too hard. When she tried to apologize, she didn't notice a hand already swinging toward her. The queen slapped her without mercy, making the maid beg for forgiveness. Another servant tried to take the blame, saying she hadn't taught that maid properly. Celise took the chance to push that woman even further. At last, the ceremony began. A lot of nobles had gathered for it. Ellen announced the founding of that circle of mages. Dreamed up by the king and backed by the noble court, it marked the start of a new era in the empire. In the middle of the announcement, a huge explosion went off, terrifying everyone. It had happened in the queen's quarters. Our protagonist grew more and more uneasy. People were saying Arsene was responsible. It looked like the boy hadn't expected anything like that, and he was badly shaken. It didn't take long for the nobles to panic too and turn their attention to our protagonist. He quickly realized this was also the queen setting him up. The king told everyone to calm down. Chaos was exactly what the attackers wanted, so they needed to keep their composure. They still didn't know what really happened, but someone there said she'd seen the culprit personally. That woman started moving toward the nobles. It was the queen saying it, about the identity of the person who blew up her apartment. After the conversations he'd had with our protagonist, Planche started getting really confused. Kallian said everyone heard the explosion, and they were relieved the queen was safe. Kallian said the boy was cynical, because he was the one behind the attack. Even while being accused, Kallian said it needed to be investigated. Kallian said that before she was attacked, Arkson had accused her of setting up an ambush, and that our protagonist had told him about it. Earlier that same day, she'd planned everything with that maid. She'd handed her an artifact to place on the vanity. The poor servant couldn't refuse, so she put the small artifact there, causing a massive explosion that all the nobles could see. Kallian said the boy clearly didn't believe her accusation, so he should bring Arkson himself there to confirm his innocence. The queen insisted she saw him placing the explosive in her room. It was all her trap for the boy, and he was stuck with his hands tied by the accusation. Then she was caught off guard by Arkson's arrival, and to make it worse, he wasn't alone. The mage greeted the queen with perfect politeness, the same person she'd just been accusing. Kallian also had no idea what her own father was doing in his company. Only then did she realize our protagonist was playing chess on a whole other level. Her end was happening right then. Back to the day Arkon disappeared, he met with Kiri. What he actually got was a few days off, but his disappearance put the Burison family in serious trouble. Evan had no way to dodge those accusations. Arkon went to negotiate with Evan, following the prince's instructions. He said the queen was going to use that to build a conspiracy, so Evan needed to hide on those lands. In exchange, Evan had to support the boy so the false accusations wouldn't go forward. Kallian now had a full strategic advantage. With the king present, he said the investigation should start immediately. The queen had demanded the mage appear, and that had just happened. As he passed by her, Kallian said he'd warned her. Celise shouldn't be so reckless. Now her own father, the king, and the knights were all against her. Celise started smiling like someone completely twisted. She said our protagonist's mother had been just as insolent, proof they really were alike. She showed she was armed with a knife, and now she tried to attack our protagonist. Blood started spilling across the floor. Nobody expected it. The queen couldn't believe the blood she'd shed. Not even our protagonist saw it coming. Planche had been told not to interfere at all, but he decided to play the hero anyway. Now the poor guy was about to die. Celise got even more furious, realizing she'd been betrayed by her own son, and she drove the knife in deeper. Kallian watched his brother suffer in a brutal way. The king tried to stop it. His knights were mobilized to restrain the queen. Deeply worried, the king told her to stop. The hand holding the knife was cut off, leaving the queen in pain and shock. Furious, Kallian asked if that insolent woman hadn't heard the king. She'd been ordered to let the boy go. The guards took control. The queen was arrested, and the nobles realized the boy had used an aura sword. That meant he was a swordmaster. In the middle of the chaos, Kallian tried to help his brother. Planche said he was impressed his brother could use aura, and right after that he passed out. Everyone called for a healer. The king was visibly worried about his son, and the same was true for our protagonist. But since they didn't know what might happen next, the king had to be evacuated immediately, something he didn't want to do because he didn't know what would happen to his son. Ellen told him he'd lost a child too, but he wasn't a king. Things far more important were at risk now, and the prince would handle everything. While the boy performed first aid, he still waited for the healer to arrive. The situation kept getting worse. Kallian was also angry at his brother. He shouldn't have done that. This wasn't the time to die, not under these circumstances, and not even the blessing of Siphanian in his blood was helping now. It was only a matter of time before he died. The healer was already on the way. Hina was heading there too. Kallian remembered Prince Randall might also be useful in that situation. In moments of chaos, the human heart shows its real intentions. Someone as calculating as him had just shown what he was capable of. Kallian was furious at that refusal to act, and he desperately wanted his brother to survive. It would be tragic for his life to be lost there. Later that day, our protagonist went to visit someone in prison. It was the queen who wouldn't be clapping anymore. She said she had a question too. She suggested they both be honest for the first time. There was something the boy was still hiding from her, and Celise was absolutely sure of it. Kallian told her everyone has secrets, ones nobody will ever find out. Now he had a question for her too, about Queen Aisha's death, and whether Celise had been involved. Showing an even more twisted side, Celise said she'd never forget it. It was the first life she'd ever taken using poison. Furious at the confession, Kallian said there was nothing left to talk about. Before he left, Celise warned him they'd promised to be sincere. After thinking about it, Kallian said he'd honestly expected the queen to ask about her own son's safety. Ignoring what could have happened, Celise said he'd only been an obstacle, right to the end. She tried to do her best for him, but the boy had proven to be a fool. He'd never been useful for anything, and her imprisonment was proof of that. Our protagonist said people run toward what they want to protect. The way that attack happened showed the queen had never been trained in combat. The boy didn't even need to block it. He could have just stepped aside. He was protected by magic too. Plan should have known all of that, but he still made that choice. Celsi wondered if the boy did it to protect her, because he had no reason to. Kallian said if she hadn't sunk so low, she would have understood her son's reasons, how he'd tried to warn her about the risk of those decisions, about her behavior, and about her inability to change. At the peak of her madness, Celsi said she didn't regret anything, laughing like something out of a nightmare. The nobles who'd still been loyal to Burison switched sides, and the queen's crimes were exposed. Celsi was executed not long after. Her death also wasn't mourned, according to that place's traditions. After a week of dismantling her palace, the work still wasn't finished. People avoided her name. Nobody wanted to be associated with the queen. On top of that, nobody expected the boy to be a swordmaster who could use magic. Since the incident, he hadn't left Planche's bedside. Planche finally woke up and asked why the boy was there with his mouth full of banana. Kalyan said he was trying to figure out how to explain his sword skills without raising suspicion. Since he hadn't reached a conclusion, he told his brother to rest more. Planche told him to do that in his own room, but our protagonist asked him to be a little nicer. Kalyan didn't want to leave yet, to avoid all the questions. More time passed, and even Ellen missed the boy. Kalyan ended up getting kicked out of Planche's room. Planche was sick of it. Considering he'd stayed there 4 days, he admitted that was more than generous. Ellen had already been imagining the boy would stay another week, and that was the plan. Even the maids were talking about the rumors that our protagonist used an aura sword. To his master, the boy didn't leave just because he got kicked out. He must have come up with some interesting conclusion, something that could work for everyone. Kalyan knew he was a terrible liar, but someone could help him. He went to the king's office, and the king also couldn't know the whole truth. Kalyan told him that during the protagonist's ceremony he'd received a blessing from Sisfanian that awakened his swordmaster ability. Kalyan would do a small demonstration. Since he could use aura and magic, he'd learned a few tricks, shaping that sword. Now the king understood why he'd been in danger in that situation more than his own son. He also realized the mage had always known. Kalyan apologized and said he should have told him sooner, but the king understood the boy's reasons. The problem was the nobles wanted answers, and Valken's ceremony had been postponed. It was suggested the boy use that to explain himself. Still, the king really wished he'd been told earlier. Ellen quickly realized his disciple was genuinely clever. For the king, all of this was beneficial. Now that everyone knew his son was a sword master, Barisan would be very cautious from now on. Not just him but Randall too, who had stayed calm even on that day of crisis. The king worried about the possibility of Randall taking the throne. His thoughts were interrupted by a question, and even with the worry he realized only time would tell what would happen. After a week the ceremony happened again. They also announced the presence of the newest swordmaster. Meanwhile, Barisan isolated himself completely, avoiding any contact. There the man didn't stop practicing with the sword, worrying even his servants. What made Evan furious was knowing he hadn't been able to see the boy's aura, something that only happens when the opponent is stronger. Finally, winter came to those lands. Our protagonist cat was wandering through the garden and ran into Plancho. Even while ignoring the animal, the cat brushed affectionately against his legs. The flowers the queen used to grow no longer scented the air there. The king's birthday was being celebrated, and he was genuinely happy to be surrounded by good company. Spring came to them too, a new beginning for all of them, and in the middle of that celebration, a mysterious man approached. Ellen and his disciple were very surprised, because Chase, the brother from our protagonist's past life, was there too. We were taken back to 2 months before that event. A lot had changed in the protagonist's life. He felt renewed in a way that was hard to explain. Ellen was personally invited to attend that birthday. The king wanted his friend there since it was his first birthday as a single man. Knowing the party would be wild, Ellen promised he wouldn't leave the region. He also said time was passing way too fast. Now that they were having some tea, the king remembered when the mage arrived in those lands and was eager to see what the new year would bring him. Our protagonist kept training his abilities, defending himself intensely against Arsen's attacks. His aura sword was a terrifying weapon. By manipulating energy, he could turn it into a powerful shield. After defending, he decided to go on the offensive, cornering the mage with ease. It was an impressive training session, done in front of all the other mages in the organization. Kalyan was impressed by Arsen's teleport ability, and Arsen was also impressed by the boy's swordsmanship. His control over mana was truly refined. He was even more surprised to find out the boy had been holding back. The mages who saw it now wanted to learn from Arsen, who didn't need to chant spells. Planche watched the training too, and when asked if he liked the show, he said no. Then the protagonist asked what he wanted now, and whether he was interested in training those mages. In his past life, Planche had been responsible for strengthening that division, a key piece in turning them into the demons they could become. That was why the protagonist made the suggestion. Planche still acted uninterested. Their conversation was interrupted by the butler, who informed them that Marquis Evan wanted an audience. It definitely has to do with our boy's aura, and he's already on his way to that meeting. Kalyan told his brother that everyone knows they're allies now. He can't stay hidden in the shadows forever, because soon he could be attacked. After training all winter, Evan wants to see our boy, not knowing he hides his aura with magic. That alone is enough to make him feel weaker. Even so, our boy is stuck, because he knows he isn't strong enough yet. Another problem is Plainage, who still doesn't have a faction of his own among the nobles. Another political war is about to break out on this board, and our protagonist needs to keep his eyes on one person, Randall, someone he ended up running into in that same corridor. Coldly, Randall said he almost wished he'd helped our boy that day. Looking down on a prince is a huge taboo in this place's customs. Kalyan, knowing that, planted himself firmly and said he was 3 steps away from putting an end to all that arrogance. He brought up that rose that seemed eternal. Looks like he finally understood what it meant. Randall asked if our boy had seen it. Smiling, Callian said he was always thinking about why the rose stood out like that. Maybe it was a sign that flowers will always bloom in his brother's garden, as long as they never end up out of reach of his feet. And that was exactly the message he wanted to send. They stared each other down at the end of the conversation. When Ellen heard about it, he was furious, and suggested introducing Randall to Evan so they could plot together against the protagonist. Since our boy seems so willing to make enemies, Ellen is furious at his disciple's attitude, but Callian made it very clear he didn't provoke anyone for no reason. Now he's sure his brother won't make any move until he's certain there's no chance of an alliance forming between Callian and Evan. After everything that happened, Evan is going to be very cautious, because he can't wait to get to our boy. Planche had also become an ally, but Reason needs to feel out new alliances, and that doesn't mean our protagonist is on the list. At the place where the illegal fights happen, people are having fun. A hooded man ended up drawing attention, and they demanded he pay the entry fee. The answer came as a sword strike that separated a head from its body. The orders Kiri received were clear. Panic started spreading through the place. The only people he must not touch are the ones who work there against their will. The guards freaked out, but they were dismembered easily. There weren't supposed to be any survivors. Kiri is carrying out his order with total dedication. He went to the main office and he almost got hit in the face when he did. One of the thugs took a girl hostage. Kiri is much more skilled now. He knows that girl agreed to be used as a hostage, so her life doesn't need to be spared. The gangster now has a hole in his chest. He said the person in charge of the place won't let this go. Kiri replied that he doesn't care at all. When the guards arrived, several lives had already been taken. Kiri abandoned his sword, revealing himself as a servant of the third prince. The news is spreading fast, and a messenger needs to report what happened. The underground fight casino was attacked. The Marquis needs to know. That same messenger's path ended up being blocked by a few people. Callian asked where the man was going in such a hurry. Completely furious, Evan scolded his subordinate because all he had to do was report what happened immediately. Now even the royal family is involved in the investigation. All of this because Kiri survived the attack. Callian passed a message to that messenger, and while he was being chewed out, the messenger said Callian failed to pull Planche to his side. When the attack happened, they were told to pin the blame on their prince. Evan is thinking about that now. He thought the brothers had joined forces, but he might be wrong. A little calmer, Evan started to believe there's still hope, deciding he'll meet Planche the next day. After the meeting happened, Planche passed that information to our protagonist. Looks like Evan bit the bait they'd set. Evan really did try to convince Planche to become an ally. The investigation is unlikely to find Evan responsible for it. The attack only served to knock down his influence. Callian now wants to know whether his brother has thought about the proposal he received. Planche said he's ready to put it into action. Our protagonist asked to be reminded what they'd planned. It's about Valken. He'll be put in charge of that division. Because of the illegal fight casino, another noble ended up being punished. Kiri received a 2-month suspension for using his sword without permission, and that time had finally passed. Our protagonist was woken up by his butler, who wanted to know if he'd like to rest a little longer. Callian said he had a weird dream. He still has the feeling of it, but he can't remember anything. The butler said it could be a sign of good luck and reported that Kiri made a move last night. He said he'd seen a Tansel caravan. That's a diplomatic visit. Planche found it really strange, because it came with several priests. He thought about bringing it up with our protagonist immediately. Among those people is also the heir of Secretia. Now the question is what he's doing there. Chase said it's an honor to speak with one of the heirs. Flashes of our protagonist's past are reflected in the meeting between those two. Chase admits he's far from his lands, but he has business to take care of there. Mounted on his horse, our protagonist saw who was there. That seems to explain the feeling he had that morning. This is exactly what was going to happen that day. Ellen was surprised when he found out who was present for the king's birthday. Chase, the heir of Secretia, something that makes him a little uneasy. Before long, Ellen decided what needed to be done. See our protagonist. He believes his disciple needs to prepare better for this meeting. He might hesitate too much, feeling conflicts tied to his past life. Chase is already waiting for him inside the hall. Approaching our boy, he revealed he'd been waiting to meet him for a long time. Callian stayed silent for a few seconds, and Chase found that really strange. Keeping his composure, our boy said he'd been waiting for this meeting too. Ellen finally managed to enter the hall as well. Seeing that both princes had met, he asked why they were practically blocking the entrance. Chase said he hasn't seen the mage in a long time and hopes he's doing well. While the two kept talking, our protagonist fell back into that quiet, inward silence. He needs to let out a deep breath because of this meeting. Planche watches everything closely for the heir of Secretia to come to those lands. There has to be an important reason. Ellen asked what that reason was. Chase realized he couldn't hide anything from him. His words might not deserve to be taken as truth, but he hopes the master will hear him out. Chase went back to the topic of the axis of time, which had disappeared without explanation. Ellen would never forget that artifact, because he was one of the people responsible for inspecting it. Now the question is why Chase is talking about it, since he was there when the artifact vanished. Since then, strange memories have been coming into his head, things he doesn't remember. At first he thought it might just be a dream, but soon he started to think he was going crazy. until he reached the point where he couldn't deny it anymore. He simply had to accept it. Those memories were real, and he's sure his brother is somewhere inside that kingdom. Ellen didn't doubt him. If anything, he was surprised. So he asked whether Chase used that artifact to bring his own brother back. He knows the war was caused by people who wanted to possess the artifact. Byrne was one of the ones who sacrificed himself to protect his ideal, and he would never ignore that sacrifice just to have his brother again. He kept the artifact until the end and never used it for anything. That lines up with what Sifanian has said so far. Even so, Chase still remembers his brother's look that day and realized he can't let him find out he knows everything. Just knowing he's okay is already a huge relief. Ellen is now deeply intrigued by these two brothers and the path fate has set for them. Kiri ended up presenting himself to both of them. He came to deliver a message from the prince, who would like to speak with them after dinner. Ellen realized he should have used a silence spell. Being careless, he asked whether Kiri had heard anything. When there was no answer, he realized he shouldn't regret it. He told Chad that Kiri is the protagonist's personal guard. Chase was impressed by that because knights usually come from noble families. Introducing himself more properly, Kiri said his last name is Byrne, which made Chase even more anxious. That's a name passed down in Sekrichi's royal family for generations. It means the hero who will never disappear. Back to our protagonist, he's still trying to figure out what motivated that visit. He's worried about the future and the war that could happen. Maybe his efforts were pointless. He still doesn't know why Planche started a war in his other life. Still trapped in those thoughts, he was interrupted by his brother. Planche wants to know why a distant prince would want to talk to our protagonist. To make it worse, Colleen looks visibly worn down, so Planche asked what his brother would do if something he wanted badly had been claimed by someone else. Planche said he doesn't have a habit of taking what doesn't belong to him. Colleen asked what he'd do if it were something he truly needed. Would he still limit himself to that moral rule? Even after thinking for a bit, Planche didn't change his answer. Our boy has to admit he really was shaken by that meeting, and the current version of Planche has no idea what's going to happen. Planche demands answers from our protagonist right now. Using magic to block the sound, Colleen remembered that his brother asked who he really was, a question that made our protagonist very nervous. Colleen said time in this world went back 10 years, leaving his brother stunned, and he used to be Chase's brother. That's the truth that got revealed. It was time for Ellen to talk with his disciple. His secret has been revealed to one more person, and that has the mage seriously worried. Colleen said he didn't give many explanations either, only that he was Chase's brother, and now he's Planche's brother. Ellen is still very uneasy about this situation, and wants to know what things look like now. Our boy has a request to make of Yuria, and he's counting on his master's cooperation. There's something he can't stop thinking about. Randall, his other brother, and all those priests who visited the kingdom recently. That isn't a simple coincidence. Outside, Planche ended up running into Chase. He asked what he was doing in the palace garden. Chase said he had free time, and the king gave him permission to look around the garden, but it seems Planche doesn't like that. Even so, Planche said he'd been misunderstood. He's actually curious and wants to know the reason for the visit. It doesn't look like Chase is there just to talk to the great mage. Chase had heard he'd be facing the person responsible for Vulcan. Changing the subject like that left Planche surprised. He didn't think the information had spread so fast. Very seriously, Chase asked whether that division is going to be the foundation of the prince's power. Watching that reaction, Planche finally understood everything. Chase must have done something in that future version through those mages. Realizing that Chase knows a lot more than he lets on, Vulcan still made one thing clear to him. He serves the protagonist. Still worried, Chase said that for the prince's own good, he'd better be right about this. Back to our boy who's reading a letter. The butler he's investigating doesn't seem to have any record at all. While he's thinking about it, he's told the banquet will be announced soon. Since he needs to reach conclusions fast, Callian asked his own butler for help. Halidome sent 30 priests there. He's sure his brother Randall is involved. The butler said they're there for the king's birthday celebration, but the number of priests is way too high, so there has to be another reason. That makes the butler really rack his brain, and our boy realizes he still hasn't understood anything. Still, the boy said they shouldn't even be able to send that many priests. Tanzel had a rough time with the rains that year. They needed help from the kingdom, and now they're paying the favor back by sending valuable priests. Colleen realized that whenever there are floods, there are epidemics too. That nation must need healers immediately. Even so, sending priests to the king's birthday, now it all seems pretty obvious. Those people can't be real priests. After that conversation, Planche got pretty lost in thought. In the castle corridors, he ended up running into Hina. He asked if the cat had gotten stuck again. Telling her to step back a little, he said he'd help. He ended up closing the door even more, and told her he'd take care of the cat that day. That's Planche's room, and besides the cat, our protagonist is inside too. Colleen went there to ask his brother if he was going to the banquet that night. Planche asked what his dear brother had planned for the day. Colleen said there are 30 fake priests in that place. The princes entered the hall together. To the nobles, it's strange to see them united. Maybe it's the way they found to show their allies. It was clear they were challenging Randall through that show of unity. For our protagonist, that's more than enough. If his brother is still planning something, he won't be able to pull it off. Planche asked if that's what our boy wanted. Kalyan said it's only the first step. He also noticed our protagonist seems to be looking for someone. Among the guests, it looks like someone is missing. Evan. Kari is already investigating outside, and our protagonist is sure that isn't a coincidence. That guard's job is to follow Randall as soon as he leaves the banquet. The prince moves around protected by his guards, so Kari has to be very sneaky and discreet. Luckily for him, a noble couple was hiding in the bushes, fooling around. They apologized for what happened, and Randall kept going with his schedule like normal. Another person who needs to be investigated is the prince's right-hand man, that guy with glasses. Kari only needs to figure out one thing on this mission. His presence was finally noticed. Those men sensed his killing intent. They aren't priests. Just like our boy suspected, they're knights, and he went to confront his brother about it. Not feeling guilty at all for liking that video that helps Mamoru make more juicy content for his viewers. Activate the cheeky little bell and out.